That is my mindset. I operate on a level of excellence, and you guys need to wake up every single day, and you need to operate on a level of excellence and create your masterpiece. What's up, guys? I'm so excited to share this next episode with you and the interview and time I had with my friend Richard Mattson. Rich was an All-American soccer player. He was also a New York State Trooper like myself, who was critically wounded and shot in the same incident that my best friend David Brinkerhoff was shot and killed in. So hearing Rich's story, him sharing with you what happened through his eyes is so powerful. And I'm so excited that you're here to listen to this story because it is really touching and really powerful of what it takes to fight through a time in your life when you are on the verge of potentially losing your life. After Rich retired, he became a judge in the state of New York and continued to succeed and persevere in his life. But without further ado, let's dive into this episode and let me share with you Richard Mattson. Hey guys, I'm so excited to dive right into this podcast at the Personal Perseverance Project with Richard Mattson. You heard his bio in my opening. Such an amazing story. I've known Rich a long time. He's been through so much, overcome so much, resilience from, his younger years, playing soccer, state police, being somebody that went through a very tragic incident that's near and dear to me, all the way up to becoming a judge and now living in the state of Alabama. I just got to talk to Rich for a little while. He is doing amazing and well, and I just want to welcome him. So, Rich, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Oh, I'm great, buddy. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a hot minute since we've talked, and it's so great to catch up.
No, absolutely. And when you know somebody well, you can just connect in a couple minutes, and it was great to get to
Yes.
connect with you. Totally. So guys, I want to dive right in for you guys to hear the background of Rich's story. For those of you that don't know Rich. So Rich, take us back to where you grew up. Tell me about your family, mom, dad, siblings, where you grew up in New York, and tell me a little bit about your childhood.
Sure. Yeah. No. My parents, they met. They're both met while they were officers in the Air Force. And then they were in like Valdosta, Georgia, and then they end up in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, when they had the Air Force base there. That my sister, I have an older sister. She's about 5 years older than me, so she was born and she would spend her time in till like two, and then getting out of the Air Force. At the time, as you know, the Hudson Valley, like IBM was like it. You either worked for the state or you worked for IBM, and IBM put
Right.
their main business in like Poughkeepsie, New York. So of
Right.
course they reached out to some Air Force pilots and are like, "Hey, we're going to work on this thing called a computer, right? We're going to
Right.
have
Right.
this, we're going to have this machine that's going to control, and you guys work with the technology." So my father, he had his degree, so he had he took the job, but he was going to night school too because they wanted me to get a master's in what they were going to teach. And my mother was a nurse her whole life, and so she was at Baxter Brothers Hospital. So she
Oh, wow.
they came up to the area, they found a home they rented while they built a home, and then um, doing their American dream in the '60s, and then lo and behold, in 1968, they get blessed with this wild card, and and then here I am. So I had a I loved growing up where I was, as much as it's as much as we're about 50 minutes outside New York City. It's a rural area, but it became built up quickly. Great kids, everybody. I still have great friends from that area, and I can't beat it. So I mean, I spent my time up there, and I was a late bloomer when it came to sports, like because
Mm.
we were just like, let's just play in the neighborhood. Let's
Right.
just
Right.
let's take our grandmother's brooms, put this ball, and we're gonna play like broom ball. But you're
Mm.
not even gonna play that. You're just gonna club each other in the legs, right? Chop each
Right.
other down, and then you can't cry because you're playing, here you are at 12 and 13, you got 18-year-olds like smashing you, give black eyes, and you don't want to be known as that kid that's not
Right.
tough.
Right.
So you suck it up. And then, so finally I wanted to play sports, but I was like, oh, I want to play baseball, and it was a funny story.
Mm.
So I totally misread when the tryouts were. So I go down and they're like, oh, we don't have baseball tryouts now, but we have this thing called soccer. And I'm like, what is this? Here I
And
am at
how
like,
old were you then, Rich? Like what
I'm,
age?
I'm like it's got to be like 12 or 13. I'm
So
late
you're in
bloomer.
middle school. You're probably in middle school.
Yeah. So I'm like soccer. And I'm like, and back then, so then I realized like, growing up, the Channel 13 was like the only one that would show like the games from England. So I grew up watching like West Ham United, Queens Park Rangers, and I fell in love with it. And I knew nothing about it. So I'm like self-taught watching what these guys are doing on TV. And so funny story. I joined this team. I'm like scoring all these goals. I'm going to be, back in the day, I'm going to be like the next Georgie Best or whatever. And then I was doing really well in it. And then like, probably like when I was like, probably a year later, or probably, I think I was like 14 or 15, um, our goalie gets hurt, injured. And everybody's like, you got to play goalie because you're this incredible athlete. I'm like, what is goalie? What do you do? I nothing. I knew nothing. So I go in and I don't know. I fell in love with it. So then once again, back then soccer wasn't in America and everybody played
Right.
baseball,
Right.
football. There was dudes, some dudes were playing. A lot of guys were playing hockey. It was actually pretty big back then. So everybody was like, I had to be self-taught. And so, and what I love about where I grew up is like, I'm like, all right, I'm going to be this goalie. So I need you guys. I would have kids in an airport. We'd show up my parents' backyard, 2 trees as a goal,
Mm.
cranking like heavy metal music. Some of these kids, some of the kids, they weren't athletes. They're smoking weed in the back of my parents' backyard, but they're kicking soccer balls at me all day. And there was no TV. We sat outside, did that all day.
Mm.
And then lo and behold, not even 2 years later, I guess I fell into it. I became All American. I was like an All American goalkeeper in high school. And then all these colleges wanted me to come play. So I settled on Adelphi University in Long Island. I mean, I got accepted to like West Point at the time because they really wanted me to play for them. But at the time, way back in the day, a lot of people didn't know. I mean, I know you can't tell now,
Yeah.
but my hair used to be down to my butt. I had this cranking hair. I was such a little
You and
heavy
I
metal
both.
dude. Yeah, I was like such a little heavy metal dude. And I was just like, I'm walking on the campus of West Point, and they're just like, "We need you here. We're gonna bring," and you're just like, and then I was like, I don't know if I give back 5 years, and
Mm.
both my parents were military, and my father knew. He's like, listen, that's a tough. If you want to do that, it's a lot of discipline. So
Absolutely.
I was like, yeah. So I ended up going to Adelphi, Long Island.
So let me take it back a second. So you loved it. So for you to be all American, right? Would you say we often hear that you are only willing to push through the hard times and put that strong work ethic in and practice all the stuff at goalie when you love something? I often hear that you have to love it to push through and push through the hard work. So for you to become all American, did soccer basically become your life day in and day out that you loved, and that's what made you
Oh,
so good?
yeah, with 100%. And it was, and I still tell this to everybody. I told this to my son growing up. And I was never one of those parents to push him. Like he never played organized sports either, because both my parents are funny. They can't even walk and chew gum. I don't even know where the hell I got my talent from, but they never pushed. They didn't know anything about sports. They never had the luxury of playing sports. My father's
Mm.
like the oldest of seven. He grew up in Philadelphia, tough neighborhood. My mother's from South Boston, tough neighborhood. So they
Right.
never had the time. They had to help support the family. They were working at young age. And then here I come and, freeload and fancy free. And it's like, but when you put your effort into something, like
Mm.
I had no idea how to play goalie. I was just throwing myself around recklessly. And
Right.
that takes its toll on you. That's not how you do it.
Right.
So to benefit for that, I had great, you had people in the neighborhood. There was also an old guy that would show us always how to box, an old Irish dude. And so we would go there and he would do this session, push ups, set ups, pull ups, hit the bag, hours. And you're just, hands are crumbled, you're bleeding, and you're just like, and he's like, anything worth doing. It's the old adage, anything worth doing is worth overdoing. He goes,
Right.
that's what's
Ooh, I
going to
like that.
build. Yeah, anything, and you, if you like, I was like, wow, that was a great resonant thing. It resonated with me. And I was like, yeah. So every day I would wake up, do push-ups, sit-ups till my eyes bleed. And I could tell. And just doing that got me better, got you confident, got you
Mm.
doing. And I did well in school. It wasn't like I mean, I was probably like B plus, A minus. I didn't really put much effort into it. because you always wanted to play sports. You always want to run
Right.
around the guys,
Right.
especially, oh my God, when you get to like 14, you're like, oh, let's chase girls, let's work out,
Right.
let's do,
Right.
you totally forget where you want to be, and you're not thinking about the future. You're just thinking about the here and now. But I always tell people to this day, if it wasn't for being playing soccer, well, I'll say from my friends in England, football, it gave me this purpose. And then inside that purpose, I added and work ethic, a drive,
Mm.
and then it got me stuff because it keeps you fit. I was always fit. I always wanted to play, and I think it just gives you, and no matter what
Perspective.
sport, yeah, it gives you that great perspective of where you want to go. And when all else fails in life, or you're down, or you're not having a great day, you can turn to your sport, or you can turn, just sit there in your room like a little prison workout. And it just gave me, it was just something that I don't
Gave
know.
you
I just,
purpose. Gave you
yeah, it was,
purpose.
and like even to this day, like I said, not having my left arm, I
Right.
still do. I'll do like one arm burpees, and they're
Right.
brutal.
Right.
I barely, when you
But
first start doing stuff like that, you barely get like two, and you're like, my goodness. And now I'm up to every day, and I think having, and everybody can find their drive through whatever, but for me, it was
right. And
definitely playing.
no, and I love a couple of things that I'm pulling out of that. I think number one is we're in a time today where I think everybody sees people's highlight reel on social media. People
Oh
will
yeah.
post they're millionaires with these businesses. But at the end of the day, I'm a big believer that without hard work, you're never going to accomplish it. And you develop skill sets at childhood. It reminds me when I became an ocean lifeguard, I was 150 pounds soaking wet, and the training I had to go through, but through hard work, it happened. And with you, you found something you loved, you worked your ass off on it, let's just call it as it is, and it led you to all American. And I think people need to understand, I think we become such a victim mentality society, and people are like, it's not fair. No, it's that you need to take ownership of your life and put the work in. And it sounds like you had a great foundation under your parents with soccer. You found a purpose, and it probably, Rich, played into your success throughout your career because you developed the work ethic, you developed the purpose, you developed the love for what you were doing.
And the sad thing, and the funny thing about that is, they rank you, there was the goalie who played for this great school in New Jersey, and one of his players became my roommate at college. And the funny thing is, usually you're supposed to have these great numbers, to make All American. Why make All American? I had 50 goals against me. That's insane. That's terrible because the team I played for, 50 goals in like maybe 17, 18 game series. People are like, some of the guys that were All American, they probably had like 2 or 3 goals against them.
Right.
And then on the sheet, when you looked at it, it said 50 goals against, 852 saves. And for people that are not familiar with that, because you play in hockey, you're like, you're facing how many shots? Like,
Right. Right.
and in our area, right, Arlington High School, they were like state champions of New York 2 or 3 times. They were a powerhouse. They had tons of All-American, tons of great guys that went on to play in college and the pros. And we would play them in one game. It's a downpour. And whatever the deal with the devil that I made, we tied 1-1. We had barely 3 shots on goal and scored once. They had 89 shots on goal and scored once. And out of that, I ended up winning. And like everybody after the game was like, you have 62 saves. And I'm like, and I don't think anything about it. I didn't know. I just
Right.
like
Right. Right.
played
You
and
stood
that,
on your head the whole game.
and luck be told, there was like 20 college Division I coaches just sitting there with their eyes dropped. Everybody's talking to me, and I'm like, meanwhile, I'm just like, okay, yeah, no, this
Right.
is fun. They're just like, how, and it was crazy. And people look at my numbers, are like, and then they're like, oh my goodness, that's crazy. It's like constantly being bombarded. So, the best thing like I take from that too in sports, like I had the best parents to play sports. They knew
Mm.
nothing. They would show up at the games, they would sit there clap. They never said a word. They never yelled. They never did anything. They didn't even know the game, right?
Right.
I
Right.
remember, we were playing, and I think one time I remember in college we were playing, and my mother, I heard her yell over 3,000 people, and it was like she didn't see that some player was just injured, and the referee blew the whistle, and she's like, "You don't know!" Like for the first time ever in her life, she yells out, "You don't know what you're doing." We're playing against Seton Hall, never forget it. Top team in the country. She's like, "You don't know what you're doing, ref." I had to look up, and I'm like, and I yelled out, I'm like, "Fran, there's an injury."
Right.
5,000 people start laughing. My mother turns blushing and she starts laughing, but because she's
Right.
never said boo her whole life. And that
Right.
was the best way. They never said anything. They'd just be like, "Oh, great game," or, "Oh, that's, next time."
But they were
Perfect.
always there. But they were always there.
Always there. Even
And
when
you
I
don't
got to
forget
play.
that.
No, and it just incredible. They showed up, they supported, you know, the guys on the team, the coaches. They were just wonderful. And that's the best way to have.
No, and
Because
Rich,
no pressure. There's no pressure. The pressure
right.
was if I wanted the pressure, it was there. If I wanted to push myself to the next level, it was there. Never had a parent.
Right. And I love it. And for all the parents out there, I always like to say, to the parents when I talk to people in an audience, what good is it if you are a public success and a private failure? And what I mean by that is, what
Mm.
good is it if you have an amazing career, but your home life, you're never there for your kids, you're missing everything? What
Yeah,
good is that? For me, it's so
yeah.
good. And
It's
you're
turmoil.
remembering like your parents were there all the time. And that's important to me. It's just as important that I'm a dad to my daughters as I am out there as a speaker and everything I
Sure.
do as Trooper. So that's great. So take us now into college. So you're all American. What happens
Yeah.
then
So
as you start going on?
yeah, it took off from there. I mean, I made, I played for 3 seasons at Adelphi, great team, and
Right.
we were this small Division I school right in Garden City, Long Island, and you know, we it was funny because my at the time, that's when soccer, uh, our national team that plays for America, the sweeper for the national team was my captain on my college team. Great human being, Mike Windershman, amazing, funny guy. I think he's still the teacher in Glendale, in Queens. One of the most amazing. But I'm playing with these guys that are just, not only playing for college, but they're also playing for our country, and they're going to like World Cups and their Olympics. And you see how humble, you see how they enjoy playing, how they enjoy a great laugh, and you learn this stuff. I was fortunate enough to play with all these great superstars that are still, that played in MLS or over in Europe, and now they do the recaps for the games on ESPN or Paramount, and they've made a great career from. They've made soccer. And they'll say the same thing. Without soccer, it's nothing. And so I
Right.
did that for 3 years, and then and I was one of those guys. To be honest, I got disillusioned in
Yeah.
college so bad. I mean, I was and not to knock college, I'm not going to do that because people will be like, "Oh, who's this guy?" But for me, it was not the thing. I didn't resonate because I never
Right.
drank. I never had a sip of alcohol in my life. I
Mm,
never did one drug in my life. And
right.
then, and that was cool. And the best part is another great thing. I never had peer pressure. Nobody was like, "Oh, you need to do this to succeed," because I was already a very popular person from sports. And
Right.
I, I just never got into it. And then I would just be like, what's it really teaching me? And what's it really teaching? I mean, sometimes you make bad choices. So I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna leave school, So I
Okay.
left, and then I was just like, I want to go play pro soccer. And then you realize, to make it over in Europe, it's very hard.
It's another
You need
animal.
it's a whole new level, and they don't give out visas, right? That's why a lot of our American players now have dual passports and stuff. And I was lucky because it was years later, I got my dual citizenship from, but I was investigating. I was like, oh boy, I'm never going to make it. So then it was just like you fall back into that routine where, soccer wasn't really big in America. The only way to go
Right.
was over in Europe. And I knew that route would, and I'm not the tallest of goalies. I'm only 5'11". I mean, I could make up for intensity
Right.
and
Right.
and
Right.
I and I actually I was lucky enough to train with a couple of teams, and I got all the support in the world for it. But you were just like, all right now. And then I settled into a life of being like a bouncer.
Yeah.
So now here I am, like, just showing up.
Hey, you did what you had to do. Like everybody goes
Yeah,
through life changes, and college is not
yeah,
for everybody, Rich, and you still have
yeah,
become
no,
very successful. So how did it
yeah,
lead to, so when did like the state police, when did you decide to get into
yeah.
law enforcement?
So
How did
then
that
I'm
happen?
so I'm bouncing, and then at the time, soccer came back, so I played for. We have, like, right now we have a couple different pro levels, but at one time when I was playing, it was like MLS and USL, United Soccer League, and there was great pro teams and there was great players from that played top level that were still playing. So I was playing for Long Island Rough Riders in Long Island, and great, get myself back focused, getting back. It's like, when I left soccer, then I was pulled back into it. Like, let me give this one more shot. I'm getting up
Mm,
in age. Let me give this one shot because I loved it. I loved the whole being with a team, training, pushing yourself. So I did that. And then at the same time, I was very intrigued. I always wanted to be a cop. I was
mm.
lucky to visit my grandparents in Philadelphia and South Boston. You want to talk about tough as nails human beings. Cops in those cities, I remember I'd be playing in the park at 8 years old. My father's in the park and this and that. And you would see groups of kids that were much older than us, and they're getting an altercation, and cops are just sitting there drinking coffee. And they were in tremendous shape. They were
Yeah.
big. And then one guy would just be like, hey, knock it the heck off and scream. And there's two guys, and there's thousands of people in this little park in South Philadelphia. And everybody was like, okay. Like, and
Wow.
I pointed and like,
Yeah.
that's what I want
Yeah.
that. I want that.
Totally. Right.
And you're just like, all right. So I took the test. So lo and behold, I did extremely well on the state police test. I scored like, I think I aced the test, I want to say. But I never heard from them. And I was like, what's going
Right.
on? So
Right.
finally they called me out of the blue. I was just finishing up soccer. And they're like, hey, you were supposed to be here like almost maybe last class. And that's how they started the conversation. They're like, you should have been here.
Really?
And I go, that's wonderful. No one called me. I go, so that's on me. And the woman is looking through it and she goes, all right, here's the thing. Can you come out this weekend and do all your testing? Because, I think they were like, oh, this guy scored really high. So I go up there and, so it's right in the September,
And
and
what year is
everybody,
this, Rich? So how old are you? What
this
year is
is,
this?
oh, I
So you
started
came on in your EOD
31. I came on in 2000.
2000. Okay. So you're
Truth
third.
that. So I started the October class. So I'm processing. They're like, we got to fast track you. So it's basically like September 1st. So I go up, I take the test, and everybody is just like, and as you know, my legs are all covered with tattoos. Just my legs are,
Right.
and
Right.
I'm in shorts and
Right.
everybody's looking at me. They're like, look at the,
Yeah.
tattoos. And I know the controversy of tattoo policies and stuff, and everybody's like this. So I'm like getting that vibe, and I'm like, oh, what's going on?
Right.
So it's time to run. I was just like, the worst you can do, just leave it all on the track, right?
Right.
So I end up, I did a mile and a half in like, I think 8:22. I flew. I was gone, and they were just like, "Who's it?" And
Who's
I'm
this guy with the
30.
short shorts on, covered in tattoos?
Oh, he's got Marvel comics up and down his leg. Who is this
Right.
train
Right.
wreck? And
Right, right.
I'm
And for the
like,
listeners to just picture this, I've seen Rich. He wears short shorts. His legs are fully covered, right? So here he is going to the New York State Trooper processing, and they see this guy, and then he goes out and kills the mile and a half. It's
yeah,
great.
because the whole motto of the state police, they want you prim, proper, shoes
Right, right,
polished, and
right, right.
and tattoos are like, you're like the dude you're like the dude they're handcuffing.
Right, right.
So
So you're still in great shape at this time, Rich, after all.
yes, I was
Yeah.
in phenomenal shape. And even as, like, people say, a goalie doesn't run, I was brought up through college as well as when I was playing a little bit in the pro leagues, great goalkeeping trainers that were just like, you need to be the fittest on the field. You need to be mentally and physically. And that
Right, right.
resonated. That then, of course, now you're getting it like, okay, I'm at the next level, and now it's being really pushed into you. So you dwell, and if you can relate to that, it's a gold, it's a
Yeah.
godsend. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just was like, I jumped into that. So then I take all the tests, I get assigned investigator, and I'm just like, oh, so they're looking at your work history, they're like, why didn't you say it? And state police, they're being SOBs to me. They're just like, oh, you bounced. What are you doing at this? And at the time, I did actually bounce in a couple of, strip clubs in New York City that were really good. So the guys catch wind of it and they're like, oh, all right. And they're like, how was that? And I was just like laughing, so lo and behold, they were like, and I was still playing. So they came to one of the games I was playing for, so I was like, oh, bring your family, come check it out. They want to see how you are and the thing. And I had an incredible background guy who actually was like a pro football player and more, he was a great guy. So then once again, he goes, man, you did great. You passed your background check, right? Because I walk in there, they're like, oh, how many times a week do you drink? And I'm like, oh, I never took a sip of alcohol. And they're like, I didn't do this. And, then you do the polygraph and it proves, you're not being deceptive. And so he's like, you're in, the class starts. I think it was like October 29th or October 30th, it was supposed to start. And I'm like, I didn't get a letter. He goes, did you get your letter? I'm like, didn't get your letter. So he calls me and he goes, I just called up to Albany. It's like the 29th or the 28th of October, 2000. He goes, I don't know what happened. He goes, it's there. They're saying you're in, but you're not in this class. And I was just like, I was
Beside
pissed.
yourself.
Yeah, I was pissed.
And just to
So
give an idea for the audience, Rich, I'm just going to stop right there. So the state police, when you take a written test for everybody that's listening, you take a written test, you get ranked, you get called for the class. You then have this processing. The first weekend that you get called, it's a physical fitness test, and you take a psychological. It's hours of a psychological exam. We'll never forget that. And then if you pass all of that, that whole weekend, you get assigned a New York State Police investigator, which is our detective division. And the investigator does a thorough background, basically from childhood to present day, talking to families, friends, references. They look at everything, which includes a polygraph. And then if you pass all that, you then go to another medical evaluation. You probably remember that, Rich, your mini medical, and then you can get accepted to the class. And I don't know if you ever heard this stat, and I knew this from the BCI. Back when we were in, it's probably similar. Well, today times have changed. They would go through about 2,000 applicants to get maybe about 100 guys for the state police in New York. So it's definitely, it just gives you the, I'm proud to say that, Rich, you probably are too, knowing like the quality of the people that came in with the state police in New York. It's not easy to get in, but Rich is just giving you an idea. I know he's talking through it. This is a thorough background. So it leads up to you're in. So I'm going to go back to what you're saying after all of this. And I don't know what happened. So go back to what you were saying. So
yeah,
what
I
happened?
mean, and the background check is crazy. And
Right.
just for everybody listening, when they do your background check, they do everything. So
Everything.
like the
Right.
moment, when I'm growing up, my nickname was Mad Dog, right? Went with
Right.
Matson. All the kids in the neighborhood call me Mad Dog. I was like this little tough little dude, always getting in fights and stuff. And so they're just like, hey, Mad Dog, state police are like, and look at the look, covered in tattoos, a
Right. Right.
nickname
Right.
like Mad Dog. Do you really want this guy, do you really want to be handing this guy a gun and keys to a car? And I made it through because I just, hey man, this is who I am. I'm eccentric. I'm outgoing.
So did you get in that class, Rich, when they on the phone? Did
Well,
they?
here it is. So I'm like, I'm not in a class. November 1st comes. Phone rings at like 6 in the morning. Hey, it's the New York State Police Academy. So many people are dropping out.
Right. Right.
You and you're, and I'm like, so what are you saying? And she goes, here's the thing. Do you want to be backfill in this class or do you want to wait till the class the following May? I said, absolutely not. I'm on my way. Threw stuff in a bag and off
You
from Long
went in.
Island all the way all to Albany. So I took a shower. I'm like, I'm in. I'm in. I'm not giving, I'm not waiting. I could have said
Right.
no, you wait. And it's funny because my test scores, since I scored really high, they rank you. So my class going in, they used to joke, it was like the guys that got like on the 80 at the bottom of the barrel. They were like all the guys, and my class was huge. So when I get up there, there's 305 people. They had a big class, but they lost like 70 within like 24 hours.
Well, you know,
It
the first,
was,
yeah,
yeah. So it was, and it was like, so, because that was like the last era. We had Nicky Kaufman, the
right,
legend,
right,
Rich Mamone, another,
right,
superheroes. You had guys that were teaching you physical fitness and DT that were just legends of the state police. And it was tough. It was still the boxing, you know, dropping, doing push-ups, you're finishing dinner. If you're not, your shoes aren't polished, give me push-ups, go polish your shoes
right,
4 hours. It
right,
was the last tough class. So I get up there, and it was funny because the first person I meet, and it would go on to be somebody that I worked with in mobile response team and SWAT, was Michael Strank, who unfortunately
hmm,
has passed. He passed of a heart failure off duty, but this is a guy. He meets me and he's just like very laid back, and we're walking. He goes, "All right, here's the deal. It's going to be so tough." He goes, "But you look tough." And he was, here's a guy that was on SEAL team too.
right,
I'm like, oh boy, man, this guy, and he's fit as
yeah,
nails. This guy, just the epitome of wonderful human beings. And I was just like, all right. So they give you the layout, so you go through, and yeah. So we ended up from, I think, when I got there, it was like 305. We graduated 202.
right. So to give everybody some background, just to kind of paint the picture. So the first thing is, and Rich, I want to say amazing, because what you did do, and I hope everybody caught what I caught, is that he was offered an opportunity. And I think so often in life, if you're offered an opportunity of a lifetime, you have to
Jump on
take
it.
advantage of the lifetime of the opportunity. That's what I say, because it may not always be there. And we say, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. And who knows what could have happened. So congratulations for jumping on that. And the second thing is for everybody that doesn't know, and probably 99.9% of the listeners that are not New York State Troopers, day one on that Sunday night, and Rich, you came in as a backfill, but it's like this throughout the weeks going through. You walk in and you have troopers screaming, yelling at you. You're in the push-up position in a suit. You're doing push-ups in a tie, and you're laughing because that's the case. You're holding a suitcase in your right hand and getting yelled at because it's your gun hand and your saluting hand. So you have to carry, no matter how much stuff you have, and everybody overpacked, you're carrying it in our left hand, and we're laughing. And you just get I'm going to say, your ass handed to you day in and day out. They're changing your rooms in the middle of the night. And it's a sleepaway. I should say that. It's 6 months sleep away. You go home on Fridays, but not at 4 o'clock. You go home when they release you, and you're back Sunday night.
8.
And the big thing though, Rich, is that they say, it's to teach us to pay attention to detail. Like even when you're signing in, if your name would hit the box, you would have to do push-ups, and you're laughing. But what it does though, it's a mindset. It's the mindset that when you're in law enforcement and you're on the street, that you're paying attention to details. And I think that carries over to life today, to know the minutia and know how you show up every single day. So I just wanted to give that background, because sometimes even Rich said the mobile response team, that is our SWAT team. And it's very easy. We can quickly talk. Rich and I, and you guys may be saying, "What is that? What are they talking about?" So that gives you a little bit of background. So you graduate, obviously, probably around May
Yeah.
of 2001 now, right? Probably
Yes.
2001.
Yeah.
And you do you go right to Troop K, or where do you go?
Yeah. I was just like, you know, I didn't want to come back to where I grew up,
Okay.
because I was this straight edge kid growing up. Fitness, boxing. My father was a black belt in judo. I grew up like that, but all my friends were the party group,
Mm,
a bunch of guys. You would be like dropouts, other side of the tracks, but we hit it off. They respected the hell out of me. I respected them, but I
right.
grew up, and I remember I was just like, so I put in for like, I'll go to Troop L. And I did very
Which is
well in the
Long
cat.
Island. Which is Long
Yeah.
Island,
So I
everybody.
was like, I enjoyed living in Long Island. And so the way we ranked our class, like, it goes on, physical fitness and of course the academics. So I was tied. We had a guy that was ahead of us, a wonderful, a great guy. We laughed every day in academy together. He was such a physical specimen, and he was great. So, and he had like, I think one test I got a 98. Rest were all hundreds. I got 98. He got like a 99 or something like that. So he's ranked first, and then another guy and myself were tied at two. And so you basically can put in where you want to go. So I'm just
Right.
like, perfect, like the top, I think like the top 40 or something. They're like, put in where you want to go. And if you've shown yourself to be squared away and all that, meticulous stuff, they're going to put you where you want to go. So I'm like, troop out. I'm going back to Long Island. I signed it like the next day. And we had to wait because, governor was taking a sweet time to graduate us. So we were doing nothing for like 2 or 3 weeks before graduation. We're just sitting there. It was so mind boggling. But anyway, so they come to me and they're like, you're not doing L. I go, what do you mean you're not doing it? He goes, there's a long list to go back to L. Like for listeners, majority of people come from Buffalo, New York, who are troopers.
Right.
And
Which
then
is the other end of the state.
And then Long Island guys that get into the state police, they serve almost like 10 or 15 years outside of Long Island. And then when they get a chance to go home to where they grew up and stuff, you're not, they'll shoot you to get back home. They don't care.
Right.
So they were just like, no, you got to go to K. We need people in K. And I'm like, do you know what I did and who I hung out with? And they're like, exactly. And then you're like, oh, I'm going back. And I'm like, oh, what is this going to be like? So I ended up coming right back to where I'm born and raised in Wappingers Falls, New York.
In Wappingers.
Boom.
So the state police, just to give some context again, so the New York state, it's a much bigger state. People that aren't from New York, you hear New York, you just think it's New York City. It's not the case. When I made lieutenant and they sent me to Batavia, New York, near Buffalo, it was 5.5 hours in the other opposite. New York is a big state, but it's broken up into 11 regions called troops. And then Troop L is Long Island. So Rich is kind of explaining when you graduate, you have to go for field training, and then you go to where you're permanently assigned. So he ends up back in his backyard, which is pretty funny. I didn't know. I knew you were in Wappingers. I didn't know that's where you landed originally.
Yeah. And so flash forward, I'm on FTO phase, right? And this is a great story. And it's like, I'm back in my home, I'm working. And, back then we're on 8-hour shifts.
Right.
So I remember we're going to do, but then they're like, okay, you're supposed to work, 3 to 11. Come in at 6 because you're going to be on DWI. We're going to have a checkpoint.
Right.
And it's got to be like day 10 for me. Now, go back into my history. I bounced at strip clubs. So we're at the checkpoint. I'm sitting there, and a rarity for sergeants there. At the time, it was the Nike who was aces, right? The Nike was this incredible war guy, just amazing veteran, amazing. And captains are there, 2 captains, 2 lieutenants, all new, you young troopers, we're going to show you, we're following a book and you got to look good. All of a sudden, this limo is coming through this checkpoint. The windows are open. It's all these girls that are exotic dancers. And they're just like, oh my God, it's Mad Dog. Oh. The limo driver stops. The girls jump out. And I'm talking.
And you're in uniform.
I'm in uniform. I'm talking pumps with. Well, women love the dress for women, and they jump out. 10 of them are jumping on me, kissing me all over. I have lipstick all over me right in front of all my bosses. And they're like, he's the greatest. He's going to be the best trooper. And they're just like this. And I'm just like, you're just like, my FCO is like, it was, and everybody, and then they jump back in the car. And mind you, I got red lipstick all over my bald head everywhere. And I'm just like, and I'm not even looking, as I'm just like, and my Stetson came off, right? That's a big no-no in a state police service. The one girl puts the Stetson on her head, and this is day 8 of my new lifetime, only job I ever wanted in life. And I'm like, oh, and I'm just sitting there, and I turn, and I remember everybody's just like, well, I guess we understand. Like the captain was wonderful. He goes, now I guess I understand the legend of Mad Dog. And I go, listen, this all could be avoided. I put down the letter L. I put down the letter L. I didn't even want to come back here because this is what's going to happen.
Right.
And everybody was laughing. I remember there was some old troopers, with like a year to go, all like, 3 times divorced.
Right.
And they were just like, bro, you got to get me numbers. You're my hero. That's like, so then I
Oh
was
boy.
laughing. It was like, and then the rest of the night, people coming through the checkpoints. Hey man, is that Mad Dog? Hey man, that's Mad Dog. And I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
it's
let me
hard.
get,
It's
let me get
hard
it.
when you
It's hard,
work.
but you know what? I give people credit because they respect it. And I grew up. I have friends that friends that ride in gangs and they do stuff, and they respected that. If they got stopped by the state police, they'd be like, cops would call me and be like, "Hey, how well do you know this guy?" I'm like, "Listen, hey, he's changed his life around. He was a thug growing up, but he's done
Mm,
really well." And
mm.
it just when you bounce that you would have some real tough guys, had some tough lives, but they were like brothers to me too.
Right. Yeah, of
And
course.
and but they always respected, and they were just like, if and gratefully they would never be in a position like, okay, if you didn't use your turn signal and you were polite to the cop. So I think the balance was they knew that I was now on the other side of the law.
Right, right,
And
right.
if they got stopped, they'd be like, hey, do you know Rich or Mad Dog? And I worked with them, and they were respectful. And I think it at first I thought it would be a total chaotic mess, but it turned out to be a great a great time, right?
It was the
Because
perfect path. Right.
it was the perfect path, and everybody balanced in it. And there was people, I would show up, and then of course, if there was sporting events, especially if there was anything to do with, soccer, everybody's like, send Trooper Mattson. He's a standout from this area. And everybody's like, oh my God, you used to play for
Right.
such and such. Now you're a trooper. So then it got to the point now I can be like, hey, listen, use sports to get what you want, right? Use it to get your education, and then realize to make the pros. I mean, I was lucky to touch the waters for a little bit, but it's a far off dream. But if you can use that sport to get your education, to get your, whether you want to be a cop, fireman, CPA, doctor, lawyer, get that drive that physical fitness teaches you. Get that drive in you, because it will carry you no matter what you do.
Oh,
That's what I
absolutely.
like
That
about
that's a
it.
big thing. I believe physical fitness, team, seeing my own kids in sports, what they learn from
Oh
that.
yeah.
And it's the levelest playing field out there. You can't shortcut your way to getting into good shape and
No.
being successful in sports, and it carries over to what it takes in life. So Rich, to fast forward, so now fast forward a couple years, when did you start having interest for the New York State Police? It was called back then the Mobile Response Team, which is our SWAT team for the listeners. So Rich obviously was a member. We're going to talk about that. So how did that come about? When did you ultimately try out? Take us through that.
Yeah. So while I was in the academy, and I did well physically in the academy, Captain Nevins was in charge. And
Yep.
of course, Sergeant Kaufman, who basically
Yep.
started our mobile response team for
Yep.
Lake Placid. Basically, for listeners, the mobile response team was started for the Lake Placid Winter Olympics. We needed a tactical team to show up, especially with everything that happens. We
Right.
needed a team. So they put together some of the fittest guys. And I remember in academy, they're like, hey, listen, we want you on our team. Keep your head on straight, do right, and then try out. So when I get out, I just got off a FTO phase, probably like 4 months later. The 13 comes out to try out for the MRT. And so, oh, this is, oh, my head's going. Can you hear me? No.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
All right. So as long as you can hear me, I can hear you. So the headsets went down. Whatchamacallit, I was like,
Saves.
oh, I wanted, especially now Gomez is my sergeant, right? Here's my sergeant is on the MRT as my sergeant in the station. And so I'm sitting there. So a lot of people were like, well, if we count for Rich's time in the academy, he can try out technically, even though I'd be like short a couple months.
Mm,
There was a lot of people that were pushing me to try out.
right.
And
But
then of course,
it was a time thing for the
but
listeners.
then
You have
you
to
know
have a
what, then
couple
you
years on.
yeah, you need that couple of years. So there's people like, the class of like Innis for Daisy and all them
Right.
going in, and they're just like, who's this? Right.
Right.
So did the right thing. They were just like, listen, we're not gonna put you in a tryout. And I said, you know what? You're right. You're right. I shouldn't just walk in like, here I am, do this. There's other people that buy their time. And I was a big firm believer in it. Put your time in, it will come. So yeah, that was probably right after 9/11, I think, or yeah, like right before. And so then I had to wait. So flash forward. So it was the start. I had to wait till 2006.
Right. Right.
So now 2006 comes and I'm 38 years old, right? I started late on this job. I'm 38 years old trying for this elite team that is a full-time team. You train for 6 months, and I'm like, okay, so I go up.
And again, for the listeners, there's SWAT teams, and I know from like just whether when I was a captain and working with other agencies, they do a 2-week training, and now you're SWAT. Like the state police in New York, it's 6 months. It's very high speed. You train with some of the military, right, Rich? So it is definitely to be on the state police mobile response team. It's tryouts are only every couple of years. You got to have some time on. You have to be a well-rounded trooper. You got to have a good work ethic. It is not easy. So take us a 2006 tryouts come up again.
And so you go in, so you have to do a tryout. There's more physical testing. You have to meet with a psychologist, have to talk about, are you okay with killing people? Because you're going to, for people listening, you see all these wonderful SWAT teams across the country. SWAT is there because the police are overwhelmed.
Right.
That is what their job is. So you go in, so they had to do all this stuff. And another funny story. So after you do all that, there's this panel. So there's deputy superintendents, there's civilians, there's all these people asking questions, and they want to see what you're made of. And then they say yay or nay. So you go in there and you really don't know the questions. So there were some life or death questions asked, situations, and I'm going through. And, when I started the state police, I was never like, I'm like, you got to write tickets every month. It was just like there was a quota, like, as everybody said, yes, there is a quota and you have to write these tickets. I was never a ticket guy. I think by the time I got up there, I'm on for like 6 years. I think I had something like 302 tickets, but they were all for like major arrests. There was like, DWI, drug arrests. I just couldn't go out there and write. If somebody was, I would just be like, and I worked at Stormville, which then became a highway station. And the number went up, and, the guys would laugh and be like, listen, they would put like $100 on the table and be like, just make the number and we'll give you the $100. And I would go out and be like, oh, I'm going to try today. And I write like 2 tickets and I'm like, I just can't do it. I was like one of those guys. And so I was doing great interview, prim and proper, uniforms on point. And then, so when one of the assistant deputy superintendents just looks at me, she goes, wonderful career, Rich. She goes, I just have one question. You've been on for 6 years.
Activity.
She goes, you only have 242 tickets or something like that. And I'm waiting for, what are you going to do if somebody, bank robbed? And I just went in my head. I just went, oh my. Yeah. And I was like, and I could see some of the guys that are on the team, mobile response team, and their eyes are just like, now, mind you, the guy that came in before me had 8,000 tickets for his career. The guy coming in after me, 15,000.
Right.
I have 232. I'm covered in tattoos. I drink coffee and I like to hang out with the Navy vets instead of write tickets, and I'm like, oh, goodness. And so I just look at her and I go, and I didn't know what to do. And I'm like, it's over, right? I'm like, it's over. It's done. I said, I might as well just have some humor. And I always like go to that low place. I go, ma'am, all due respect. I go, is that too much? Should I tone it down? I go, no, should I tone it down? I go, ma'am. And I'm like, ma'am, all due respect, should I tone it down? Because I don't want to be known as that guy just right. She comes up, and I remember one of the third in charge, like, loses it. Like, he couldn't hold it in. And she's like, I did that to see how you would react to, like, a little quick little verse here or something. And she goes, once again, she goes, my little superstar passed. And I was like, and I didn't know what that meant. And I was just like this, and I come out and I remember, I think it was Wink, right? I think it was Jerry, right? And he says, I go, dude, I go, what, he goes, I don't know how that went. Like, everybody's like, like, how did you go there? I'm like, what are you doing that? Like, what are you doing? I'm like, it's over. So I'm sitting there, and next thing you know, they're like, these are the people that made it. I made it. And I made it
Unbelievable.
with 242 tickets. Go figure. I was
Unbelievable.
like,
Unbelievable. In 2006, to paint the background, some people, Rich, I don't know if you remember, we had a lot of troopers that were shot that year with incidents. I think it
oh,
was close to 9 people in 2006. It was a really,
Andrew
really rough.
Spear.
Yeah.
That was
I mean,
like when
but
I
there was
was
a,
in training, Andrew was, oh, that was such a tragedy
yeah.
because I knew him. He was the human. He was a cop's cop, an
Yeah.
incredible human being, just an incredible human being.
So take me,
So,
how was the training? How did you get through the training? Because I know the training is 6 months. What did it take for the mindset to get through it? How challenged were you? Talk to the audience a little bit about that.
oh well, you start off, and it's they really wanted to make this a tough, you know, uh, camp, like we call our camp session. So there's shooting, there's training. So every day, 3 o'clock in the morning, you wake up. And, just to give people a background, we had a great sergeant, Tim Pigeon, who was like running it. And for those of you, you might know that name because Tim actually played in the NFL. He played for the Buccaneers and he played for the Dolphins. So he did 4 years.
Oh, wow. I didn't
This
know that.
guy, this guy, and I'll give people background. This is a guy who's probably about 6'4", walks around at like 250. But let me tell you, he's on my tail running. And here I am, a soccer player, and this guy is just. I've watched him in the academy on a treadmill, level 12, going at it, eating a Snickers bar and not even breathing heavy, right? Because there's people that, like, say, when you push yourself to the limit, there's people out there that you just go, oh my goodness, I'm good, and I consider myself top level you
Right.
can, but then there's just people
It
that
humbles
are
you.
there's that farm boy strength, and then there's rock stars. Like, that was Pigeon, and I was just
Wow.
like, whoa. So we would get up in the morning and run and do everything. I mean, and at the same time, we had to go through training too. We all had to be EMT, so they're giving us this crash course in EMT. So mind you, getting up at 3 in the morning, running, carrying dummies, carrying each other, sandbags. You're just. It doesn't matter. And my class was January. It's it's Albany. It's
Mhm.
sleeting and snowing almost every day. Or if it's raining, it's cold, it's miserable. You don't want to sit in class for hours and learn about EMT, and then you got to learn, then you go out and shoot. So then you have to go and shoot as well. Like, you have to qualify. And they basically said to us, they're like, listen, you have to get every time you shoot like a 237. Like, top score for people listening is 250 out of 250. You must shoot like a 237. We don't want that. We want you to shoot over a 242 each time, but we'll give you leeway. And I don't know if you know this part, but Brink was not really a good shooter.
Oh, I didn't.
So Brink was having
That was a struggle for him on the
he
first
was
tryouts
because
a couple
this
years
poor guy is
earlier.
going. He was going to get his master's in my training, so he's going to get his master's. He's doing all this training, and then he's just like, he's on the shooting range, and they basically were like, Brink, you need, like, it was close for him. It was so close. And I was just like, but then again, there's Dave, he's going through his masters. He's trying to make the SWAT team. He's struggling. And I mean, like, he's on the cusp.
Yeah.
And then something clicked. He put the time in. He refocused, and he
Mm.
did it. And that's
Wow.
that's what I said. You have these incredible individuals. Like, I never shot a gun, until I got to the
Right.
academy. I was like, I don't need a
Right.
gun. It just came naturally to me. So, like people say, it's good because sometimes guys from the military have bad habits, and some people are hunters or bad habits. I didn't have habits, so I was shooting. I would shoot 250 all the time, 247, even,
Right.
no problem. But somebody like Dave that wasn't a good shooter,
Right.
like I talked about the sergeants being extreme athletes and pros. I mean, now here's Dave, who's just your humble, amazing human being. And he did something in his head. He sat down, whether he mentally visioned himself passing or what
Right.
he did it all on his own. Like, he would look at us and we showed him some techniques, and then he changed it. And it was amazing. It was
It's
just
great.
amazing. And that's, like I said, you get to work with these individuals that are high-end rock star superstars,
Right.
And then you have individuals that are just humbled that want to
Right.
better themselves by joining this SWAT team, and
Are just
because
solid.
yeah, and solid. And so we did that. And so we graduate. Now it's July. We make it through, and at the time now is the greatest manhunt going on in the history of New York State. It's for
Right.
this reject Bucky Phillips, who escaped out. He was a local little thief who escaped out of prison up in, I think, like Fredonia area, and then he shot Trooper Brown on the side of the road, who stopped him one night in a stolen car, and they were looking for him. Now it's set off this massive manhunt. So mind you, the mobile response team is already out looking for this guy. There's,
Yeah.
for people listening, we have now, I think there's like 5 or 6 teams broken down in regions. So I was the southern tier, Brink and I. So that's southern New York that covered Long Island. Then you have the capital team in Albany, central
Right.
team like Syracuse. Um, West team is Buffalo. Then there's the border team up by St. Lawrence, and you know, and then we, of course, we incorporate that with some of the guys that are trained to be snipers that work with us, as well as some of the guys that help out like at riots and everything else. So you have this great, so our team has evolved from being like 60 dudes out of 5,000 troopers that only make this team to, supported by other great troopers that may not have made the MRT or the sort team, but they're working with the sort team. So when their opportunity comes, it can be
Right.
blended, and they know how the machine works, which I think is it's a great way to get people in, and then they can say, okay, when my turn comes, I already know how
I'll be
this
ready.
machine
Right.
works.
Right.
And so we did this. So this manhunt's going on. So
And Rich,
um,
to tell you, I don't know if you know this. So I went to your graduation
mhm.
in the main lecture hall at, so the graduation's at the State Police Academy. We Brink's wife Barbara, we had this big party planned with this gigantic tent, spent a lot of money, had this
Yep.
big tent. And I remember the superintendent, for everybody that's listening, I was sitting in the audience, basically said, congratulations, but you are now activated and deployed to Western New York to look for Ralph Bucky Phillips. So you guys got deployed. We literally went to this party and had this big party in this tent without Brink there.
Yeah.
So everybody was there, but that's kind of, I'll never forget being at this party. But that's how you guys
Yeah.
started. You
You
were
left
right into.
graduate those guys. So and then so they call us over in the South. So the South team's all activated. So 2 guys, it was myself and Mark. They're like, you two, they had to leave 2 guys in each region just in case
Right.
there's a critical incident. So and then at the time, now it's after 9/11. So not only do our detectives in the BCI work with the governor, there's 2 MRT guys signed with them too, SWAT, because, times are tough. We don't know when there's the next attack. So it's just, I remember everybody's going out to Buffalo that night, like
Mm,
the guys that have been
right.
on the team for years, and then the newbies. And then Mark and I are just like hanging out, working with the governor, and that detail. And
Yep.
we're like, wow. And we're listening to all this stuff that's going on. And then, we eventually made our way out there, and he did rotations for, the up until it ended. And right before, unfortunately, Trooper, Joe got shot, Longobardo. I was out in that same area, like not even a day or two before, and had this weird feeling that somebody was watching. And
You were on
they
that
had,
post, Rich. You were on
I
that
was on
post.
on in that field. I was out that field. It was, I'll never forget. It was me, Carmelo, and Brian Stone, great guys from the West team. And we're just like, you had this weird feeling you're being watched. So for people listening, this guy was just running around Western New York. He had all these people that were helping him. You had a community up there that was selling shirts that it was Bucky 3, meaning he shot 3 troopers,
Right.
and state police was 0. That community was just like, oh, he's just a common thief. You guys don't belong here. Well, he's already shot 1 trooper in the vest that went through and hit him in the rib. Luckily, it came out. That was Trooper Brown. And then now we're in a situation. So I come back and I'm like, and I was looking and I was like, man, there's somebody out there. And you couldn't see. It was so we had to sneak out when the sun came down because we're trying to be inconspicuous. And I remember telling the bosses and as well as everybody, I go, do not put anybody at that position again because it's so open and it's dangerous. And they're like, okay, and it's dangerous. So I remember I did 2 more days and I went home I had like
Now,
2 or
to
3
give
days.
people an idea, Rich, you guys are in a wooded area watching Ralph Bucky Phillips'
Overlooking,
house.
we're
Yeah.
watching his daughter's house. We're in the back of
Okay.
the field. So where we are is probably about 60 yards from the house. It's this little culvert. It has patches of trees and grass and some rock area, but getting up to it, it's surrounded by dense forest. You do have to come across an open field, and there's active cows and other stuff in there, but it's a little bit high. It's not like the farm fields you see like on TV, like down south here. It's actually, the grass is really high. So right before I left for my break, we were short numbers because, you know, the state police thought that this guy was going to walk out of woods and give up.
Right.
And they were like, he's living in the woods. And I'm like, nobody's living in the woods. Out of all the history of manhunts, you barely can survive 3 days in the woods without water, food, and just animals. Just the bugs up there will eat you alive. So unfortunately, this guy had all the community letting him stay in a basement, in his garage. So this guy was taking showers, eating like a king. We're looking in places he's not even there, right?
Right.
It's this mystical illusion. We're
Right.
chasing ghosts, and there was a lot of, you know, mismanagement with state police brass. But so all of a sudden he breaks in and steals all these guns from a gun store. He steals guns that are now the same guns that we use. He's got M4s, he's got a semi-automatic 308, he's got stuff that can do damage. So they catch a wiretap that he's going to come back and shoot up SP Fredonia or whatever, one of the, you know, or in Chautauqua County, whatever. So it's high alert. We're looking, and I'm like, okay. I going on break, and I'm like, you need everybody up here because this guy's going to hurt somebody.
Right.
And, you know, sooner or later, I was home for 3 days, and I got the call. You know, I was like, worst call of my life, or second worst call of my life. But they were just like, it was, hey, get your stuff. I remember it was Mark. Mark's like, go get your stuff and get to Albany. And he goes, you driving? I go, yeah. And he goes, you okay? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, and everybody knew because I was really good friends with Joe too. We went to DT school. We were roommates for defensive tactics. And he goes, I'm just going to tell you this because I know your relationship. He goes, Joe's bad. Joe and Donnie got shot, and Joe's really bad. He goes, he's probably not going to make it tonight. And it just hit me. Like, that was the first time I had to deal with it. You know, like, you know, you hear about people getting shot. You know, when you're a cop, you hear other officers. You go to funerals, and you're like, "Wow, this is tragic." And you see it now. It's hitting right in your own. It's not even in
Right.
your backyard.
Yeah.
It's right
Right.
next to you. It's right next to you. So I drive up. We get in a plane. We go up there, and of course, that guy gives up, and that manhunt's over. But you know, that was my first dealing with. Wow, here's a gentleman who I loved. You know, Joe was amazing. Had an, you know, him and my son was born like a week before his son. And I was just like, whoa, you know, and then you're
Mm.
just like, oh man, it was tough, right? And you had to deal with that. And then, you know, we all get back into what we do. We do drug raids. We work, right? You know, at the time you were in the BCI,
Right.
we were looking for, right? That homicide suspect you guys were
Right.
looking for.
Right. Right.
And so that's how you and I are. Well, I knew you prior to that, but then our paths would cross a lot because you would call us to look for stuff and drugs. And
Right.
it's a great, you know, working relationship we have in the state police. You know, it's just like no one person. Yeah, we can say we're trained better than most, but in the end, you know,
They're human
I'm
beings.
I'm
Right.
confident. I'm confident that if we're standing next to each other and somebody's shooting, you're shooting back, right?
Right.
Like
Right. No,
I,
absolutely.
I you never had to blink about that because that's what was so beauty of it. We made sure that everybody who, if we did stuff, was trained or had the gunpowder. I mean, excuse
No.
me, not the gunpowder, but the gun power to defend. So then
So,
flash
Rich,
forward
just
now.
to pause for a second, I want to take the listeners back. So, to explain to them what happened is the post that Rich was on watching this daughter's house. Joe Longobardo and Donnie were another two MRT guys were sent in there and basically were ambushed and shot by Ralph Bucky Phillips. And Joe ultimately passed, and Donnie lived, but he still had tons of surgeries. So that happened. I'll never forget that. Joe also was a classmate of mine, as was Brink,
Yeah.
when I heard that with the 180th session with the state police. But Rich, I want to ask you, because there's people out there that have lost people tragically. Some may be kids, some may be family members. So what was the
Sure.
mindset that you, to press forward, you now went through 6 months of training with Joe, literally just finished in the amateur. You became close with him, and then you lose somebody and you have to get right back up and brush yourself off and get back on the saddle. Like, do you remember what it took mentally? And I know for law enforcement, we tend to put up the shield. That's what it is, the mental shield, right? We put the blocker
Yeah.
up, but it had to be hard. But do you remember what kept you going? Was it you talking to people, the other team members? Like, what people that lost people, what would you say to them in the audience if somebody lost somebody
It's,
tragically?
you know what, and I'll, we'll get in, from my shooting coming up
Right.
next, but I mean, I'll tell you because I lived that and I've been shot and I've been through it. People, most people in their lives will see about three uh, incidences, tragic. And I learned this because I went out and spoke about being shot. And I talked to some great psychologists, and they told me these numbers. Three, most human beings, regular, everyday, hardworking American Joes,
Right.
they'll experience the death of a grandmother or a mother, father, or maybe unfortunately a child. Cops are going to see over almost 900. A regular beat cop is going to see over 900 critical incidents that affect your mind. And
Unbelievable.
I don't know what it is because it's PTSD.
Yeah.
And I'll say it to you all right now. It stays with you forever. There's
Forever.
nothing. I will sit here and you know me. I
Right.
will tell you stories. I will make people laugh.
Right.
I'll tell you
Right.
stripper
Right.
stories kissing me. It's a way of how I deal with it some days. But there's days for Rich that I'm you just get, it's a weird feeling, right? you
Yeah.
you, you still want to work out and you're doing your workout or you're doing your daily life, but something's off. Something is completely off and you can't explain it, and it's
Right.
so hard to talk to people about it.
Right.
Cops understanding, some people, some do, some don't, it depends. But no matter what whether you're a cop or a civilian and you see these tragic, someone die tragically, it's a fog that enters you. And no matter what you do and how well you talk, even if you do everything right and talk
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and do everything, I tell people it's with you for life.
Yes.
It's, it's the devil, it's always going to be there.
Right.
And
No,
like you said,
absolutely.
and fortunately, cops, they put up this wall because here we are. We're a tier one SWAT team that's trained in everything from nuclear, meth labs, everything. You have to do all this training to get to tier one. And that's like, I had the amazing pleasure of working with guys from LAPD SWAT, Dallas SWAT, ESU in New York City. They are the ultimate rock stars of SWAT. They are amazing. But there's some great SWAT teams across the country. I had the ability, especially HRT, those guys as well.
Right.
I mean, and
Right.
you talk to guys, and it's tough because a lot of guys, they lose themselves. Like sometimes it's better to drink a fifth of vodka
Right.
and still like go to and help your, I know guys that have seen stuff, that have been to stuff, and they use that. That's how they do it. They're like, hey, listen, I'm gonna take a pain pill. I'm
Right.
gonna sip this scotch very slowly, and then I'm gonna fall asleep because I can't get sleep without it. And
Right.
that is and that in
Right.
itself is a tragedy because unfortunately in this country, we don't cure people, we just make customers. And
Right.
PTSD is something, if you have something that may not be 100% curable, we're just going to throw everything at it. So we're going to throw alpha male. I'm okay. I'm good. I'll be all right. I'm good. Yeah, I'm just going to go work out. I'm going to be good. You're not good. It's in your head. My
Right.
workouts, I'm getting my workout on. Everybody's like, oh, you can get on. Or you go out with your girlfriend or your wife. You're like, I'm good. I'm good. But are you really? And the
Right.
answer is absolutely no,
Absolutely
because
not.
we put up this alpha wall. And I think the best thing, like I always say, you live this, you know, lifestyle of being, hey, my phone goes off, here I am going to be like this modern day superhero. But at the end of the day, when there's nothing there left, I mean, it's tough. There's days that are
No,
really tough.
absolutely. No, it is.
So
And that's
it's so hard. And I mean, it's an answer. I don't even think it has an answer, is that you have to, each person individually has to deal with their tragedy and they have to find that reason. The best advice I can get, because it creeps on me, is that you get up, and if you know you're having that day, try to talk to somebody.
Right.
Try to talk to somebody. Get your workout in. Try to talk.
Yeah.
Go for a
Yeah.
walk. I have the beauty. I get to walk on this pristine beach every
Right.
day.
Right.
There's sugar sand, and there's,
Right. Right.
I'm looking at gorgeous women walking by, and I'm just like, oh, I'm having a bad. No, I'm not. I'm okay,
Right.
right? You can say,
No, but
oh, my
Rich,
day's getting better.
you brought up a really good point, because suicides, if there's any law enforcement that are listening,
Oh,
listen, when I
yes,
was the zone commander as a captain, one of my troopers at Somers committed suicide. I had to go there.
yes.
Suicides are up. And I think the number one thing, and I could tell you this, and we're going to get into this story because it's coming up with the shooting that Rich was in, which also ultimately led to the loss of my best friend. I still believe for a good year to 2 years after that, I should have spoken to somebody, because the images that I
Most
have when
definitely.
I went lights and sirens and got myself to the hospital and seeing Brink in the hospital, and I'm kind of getting ahead of the story, that affected me, and that image in my life, it's part of my story and why I am the way I am today, because it reminded me, I like to say life doesn't always fire a warning shot. And with that is you just
No,
don't know. And for me, seeing Brink there, seeing what happened to you, having Joe Longobardo being passed, I learned two things. Like I said, life doesn't fire a warning shot. But number two is, if you're struggling, to ask for help, to speak to friends and family. I think especially today, people struggle. PTSD can come in many different forms, and yet you have to speak. And I think Rich really nailed it on the head with that. So Rich, let's fast forward to, so I know April 24th. I'm going to give everybody the context. April 24th, 2007. I remember that I heard, I was down as an investigator, which I was our detectives, and I heard about another trooper that was shot in 2007 now, but 2006 was just an unbelievable year. And Trooper Matt Gambozo got a call and responded. And to give people the context in the background, it was this person. Part of me wants to leave him unnamed, but this person is acting suspiciously in a mini mart parking lot in upstate New York, in Margaretville, New York, and the trooper gets dispatched there, and unbeknownst to the trooper, this guy has a warrant that's not in the system. They kind of call it a pocket warrant. I think it was a probation warrant at the time. And the trooper goes up, and this guy pulls out a handgun, and he shoots Trooper Gambozo point blank in the chest. And luckily, for the listeners, he did survive. His vest caught it, but it turned into an immediate massive manhunt again. Within probably, now, Rich, with you, you just graduated less than a year earlier at this point, not probably less than a half a year. I forget what month you was. And now let's bring us up to, where were you when you heard about Trooper Gambozo shooting, and kind of take us into this incident that you dealt with.
Yeah, and great. And I was Matt actually trained with me. He was
Oh,
with
wow.
me in Wappingers for a little while. And side note that a lot of people don't know that he knows. His wife, we were out one night and he saw this beautiful woman in a corner, and Matt was a very quiet person, and I was just like, and I just stopped, because when somebody makes promotion, right, stop, everybody stops in, they have like a drink and they go
Right.
on.
Right.
So I actually had to go to work, so I stopped in. I was going to work the overnight, so I go in and everybody's sitting there, and Matt's there, and he's like, hey, look at her. And I was just like, and his wife Lena, and she's just a wholesome, beautiful woman inside and out. And I was like, and I would always joke with him because he was so quiet, and I would ride with him, and he would just laugh because I mean, if you ride with me, I mean, as you can tell, I'm just nothing but just the worst of the worst
Energy.
is jokes. Yeah, the worst of the worst energy. I'm drinking coffee, washing it down with Red Bulls, and it's an overnight. So I looked at him and I go, listen, I'm going to work tomorrow. You better have her number, or I'm going to take your locker and throw it out. Sure enough, he comes into work early in the morning. I'm tired, I'm about to get off. He's like this with this little number showing me. So,
I
um,
didn't know that. That's funny. I didn't know
yeah,
he
it
was
was a
in
great.
K.
Yeah, he was in K for a while. Then they moved up to Margaretville, and they love it up there. So we were training because we were, our team, the Southern team, all teams for the sort at the time, or mobile response team, are at airports. So we can get in helicopters and be gone in seconds if we need be. So we're at Stewart Airport and we're doing some training. I know we had some canines jumping out of helicopters that day, and it was a beautiful day. I remember it was sunny, and we were joking around. And I think I think Perry was there with his, when we still had the Rottweilers on the, state police, these
Mm.
crazy, and of course here I am antagonizing these things, and I got bit in the butt, and just joking around. And
Oh,
then we
geez.
hear it. Then you hear the call because the radio is always on. You hear signal 31, shots fired, shots fired. It's Gambosi. And you know it right away. And then you hear the radio, hold on, everybody hold traffic. There's a shooting in C. And we're like, what? Trooper hit.
Now, Rich, what
And
is a
then,
signal 3031? Tell for the audience that doesn't
all right,
know.
so signal 30 is signal 31 is what the trooper is for other police agents at 1013. So when cops
Right,
come upon a scene and an officer has been shot or is
right,
down, you will say signal 31, shots
right,
fired. Most agencies say 1013, officer down. I mean, I
right,
know down south they have 999 officers shot. They're like triple
right.
nine, 999. So a signal
It's
30
the,
is
go ahead.
it's the emergency code that everybody knows. They're like everybody, the
Everything
radio shuts,
stops.
everything stops, and everybody's focused on. All right. So then comes out, road trooper shot in the vest. He's okay, but this guy is loose in the community. Our central team was handling it, and they had some sheriff SWAT teams too join them, and they're searching for this guy. So I remember we're sitting there, and we go home, and then of course you have this chain. So Wink calls me, Winkowski, and he's just like, all right, you got to be on the road. We got to be up there by 5 a.m. We're going to relieve our central team. We're the team to go. And then he's like, so at the time, I would call somebody. So everybody would call somebody and this and that. So I would call Brink. And so I'm like, yo, and he goes, what's going on? I'm like, we're going. So this is like at 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, we're going. He goes, okay. And I'm like, so where I am, I drove up to the Conic, go over to Kingston Bridge. And then Brink was waiting for me in his troop car because we all take home troop cars, and Joe was with
Right.
Joe was with us. So all three of us just go up. You don't. I mean, it was early in the morning, but we're doing like 120. And
Okay.
So where this incident takes place is probably about an hour and a half from where I live. Probably from Dutchess County. Just so it's basically Hunter Mountain for people that know skiing. It's right in that
Very,
area.
very rural. It's a rural
A
area.
little bit, or the other, maybe it's not Hunter, it's the other one, but it's actually Delaware County, New York, which is huge, very rural. So we get up there 5 in the morning. They're filling us in. Investigators are filling us in. Central teams filling us in. And lo and behold, we have 6 guys in a helicopter, is what we call elevated platform, elevated sniper, just in case we can find this guy. And so they're looking. And then we have teams of 2 driving around in our cars looking. So there's the regular road troopers are all set up on roadblocks, and we're just going to areas that last seen or somebody. So mind you, when anything happens in the world, there's always a call center where people are like, oh, I see a suspicious character. It could be him, because nobody really had a really good description of this kid or who he is. And so they're like, oh, so troopers would come, and then we would show up, and we'd go as like teams of 4, right? Troopers had their Glocks, some had their, luckily we were updating to ARs and stuff. And then of course we had our M4s and stuff. So we're looking, and I remember it's like about 8 o'clock, just before 8, we get the call, like there's an alarm going off at this farmhouse. And so I hear like Joe going over there with his partner. And then I show up like 3 minutes later. And inside, so there's this beautiful big farmhouse, and then there's this big barn right next to it. So inside the barn, they found a makeshift bed and all these rifles. And they found the guy's wallet, and they found him, and it matched the description. So we find out who it is that we know. So the alarm in the main house is going up. So if you're looking at the house, I see that there's a screen off on the back window, like high up, like he had to climb a tree, jump on the roof, and get in. Can't see that the window's open. We don't see any movement. So it was determined.
Is this the
So
front of the house now, Rich? Are you looking at the front?
I'm in the back of the house, and I see the
Okay.
screen off.
Okay.
So we're walking, we're keeping cover. So I catch it first, and I'm like, hand signals, and everybody see it. So one of the guys gets on, the wireless mic and to the command center, and they're like, all right. So normally when there's a big incident, you're going to have tons of SWAT, you're going to have tons of troopers. So we basically have 6 of us. 6 of us are going into the house. And this is a 2-story old Victorian house.
Right.
For those of you that know, you need about 16 guys, because everything we do is, speed of action for SWAT. So you want to get into a house, The first two guys peel off into the room. The other two go down the hallway. You're flooding and filling these different rooms and hallways. So you get in, and in 30 seconds, you're going to dominate this area. That's why, if you look in the history of SWAT, they succeed because we do raids, we throw flashbangs, and it's this surprise and then this violence of action, right? Big muscular dudes running in. We have firepower. Right. Everybody on the ground, It's that surprise you're supposed to do. Now we have 6 guys, so we have to totally change our tactics, which means we have to go to slow and methodical. So I kick the door open, and it's for Daisy. It's Brain for Daisy. Then I'm behind them.
So you guys are in a line for the context.
We're in a
SWAT
line.
team hits the door. There's 6 guys.
You come around the corner,
right?
And it's fast. For Daisy and Brink go on an angle. I go on a different angle to the kitchen. We're like, New York State Police. Let us know you're here. If you're a homeowner, let us, New York State Police. If you're in this home, we're here. Sort of takes away the surprise, right? Because then if there's a bad guy in there, he can set up. So the downstairs is clear. We come around the corner to the stairwell, and you can see that there's a gun safe. Somebody tried to break in. There's bullets all over the floor. So a little background, this home, this beautiful farmhouse is owned by a sergeant who's on the Middletown Police in Jersey, right outside of Fort Lee. A great human being who I can talk to and call friend, because we've talked over the years after this incident. So he was in Fort Lee. So Rob had this home, and luckily this guy couldn't get his guns because it was that secure, but he had brought other guns that he stole from his grandfather. So now we go up the stairs. So we go up the stairs, same thing. All these rooms were clearing. So I'm in one room, and I look over, and Daisy and Breaker in the other. And they look at me, and we're doing everything hand signals. We're quiet and you could feel that something was off. So they go out. They come down the hallway, and I'm supposed to come right on their tail. They go down, and I'm on their tail, and my partner stayed in the room, and they go into the room to the right at the top of this other back stairwells. We came up one stairwell. Now there's another stairwell. So 2 guys were downstairs just trying to, it was so big that we needed to have like
somebody downstairs.
We had to have like a situation where it was hound instead of hunter. We're going to flush this guy. If he runs out, then Danny and Brian would be downstairs. So you have to, sometimes when you don't have the manpower, like the best part of it is like, oh, SWAT knows this, SWAT knows that. The greatest line I ever heard was from a great friend on ESU. He goes, sometimes you do stuff just so everybody gets out alive. No matter, because life is going to hit you, right? Life is going great. Murphy's Law is always there. So now we're in this situation. We don't have enough guys. They go into the first room. You hear that 22, and he has a 22 handgun. And they Brink falls back, like almost right in front of me. But Daisy gets into the room, and I know he unloads into the wall. And they're like, shots fired. And so I look at Dave, and I'm like, you good? And it just startled him. He, unbeknownst, he had taken, I think, maybe 2 rounds to his plate. Now in SWAT, we wear this heavy armor. Mm-hmm. It's going to stop a handgun. It's actually going to stop an AK-47. You'll feel it, but you don't want to take anything. It will stop the heavy stuff, whereas a trooper's vest will stop a handgun only, not a rifle slug. So he takes it as I'm helping it. This guy in the first room, he was like on a corner room. He swung around and just pops the gun out and fires. And there's shots. Like, I don't hear the shots because, once again, everybody should wear headset, like ear protection. It's a little awkward for me. So I'm like, I got the earpiece in like I have here. It looks like just like this. But let me tell you, when an M4 goes off in a closed space, you're zapped. And I'm just like, what I feel is ceiling tiles coming down on me. So he's shooting down the hallway, and it's above Brink and I. And I'm like, you good? And he goes, yeah. So he gets up to one knee, and he scoots over to the door, and he's got his gun up. I'm like, all right, he's good. Now, when you're in SWAT, you never look behind you, right? Because it's simple. It's all about hand signals and touching. I never have to turn around to see my guy. If no one, I just sit there. When I feel somebody touch my shoulder, and I know to continue to go forward. I'm never going to take my eyes. And then the same thing for the whole situation. people are like, oh, could you retreat? We don't retreat. Where the shots are fired, that's where we start. And if somebody goes down, you pull them out, but the other two guys pull out the injured and you step over them, you go forward. We go
Right.
towards the threat.
Right.
We don't, our whole object is to pin this guy in a close corner, and then we're going to eliminate the threat. So we don't give up space that we were taking. So I don't feel a touch on my shoulder. And I'm just like, man, these guys are in a room. This room's wide open. I see guys on the stairwell, which are Joe and Danny. I'm like, I got to get down to this room. So I get down to this room. I quick peek it, and these bullets come flying out at me. And there's a barricade. I can't see it. It's like right by my face. I heard the zip, the wall behind me. I was like, ooh. But I didn't return fire because we don't know if the homeowner's there. And there's this barricade. I couldn't see through it. So is this guy holding the last thing you want to do is be reckless, right? You don't want to overshoot. So sometimes it's not as simple as you see on TV. And like, people don't realize gun battles happen within 8 feet. And it's insane. And I was just like, all right, we're in it. This is it. This is us. So then we're in the hallway. So I just start, this is the state police. Give up or we're going to kill you. So I'm just like, I'm dropping F-bombs on this guy. I'm like, we're coming in. We're eliminating you. This is your last chance. But I couldn't really see. There's a barricade. There's beds. So then I'm like, and I'm just like on the mic, and Verdasi's like, we don't see him, and I can hear a little bit. Like the radio system is so bad because we're in a vast mountain, so we're basically shouting. And I'm like, no visual, no visual. And I'm like, all right. So then I see that Brian looks at me with a flashbang. So I'm gonna go up to this room, try to kick that barricade that's right there. It's like half a bed and a drawer. We're gonna throw this flashbang in, and our hopes is that he cuts around the corner that to the hounds that are waiting, which would be Brink and Pete. And but usually, you always try to take the angle that you don't see. The unknown is like on me first, but I don't have somebody with me. So my whole idea, I'm going to kick this door, and it's just me, right? With the hopes of this flashbang coming over my shoulder and scaring this guy. And man, I kick. I get right to the doorway and I give it this like shove kick with my foot, and I look to the right, and now I'm right-handed. So technically I should have switched to left hand and come back this way. So right hand, I see that, and I see a shadow, and I was like, I knew, because it was an unknowns on both sides. It was just the way this weird room.
And to give the listeners context, so picture, because I've seen the diagram, Rich, and I'll try to explain it, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I've seen it. There's a hallway. At the top of this hallway on the second floor, there's a stairwell. Middle of the house goes down. Right off the hallway is a bedroom. There's a doorway. The opposite corner of the bedroom, for the listeners, is another doorway that leads to a second bedroom that also has an exit door to the same original hallway. So this person is now in the corner of the doorway to both bedrooms, and he's able to fire rounds towards both exits of the bedroom.
For a 23-year-old punk, he has a 180, what we call a 180 ambush. He's able to move and keep us at bay, per se, because we may not have the numbers at times. So that's where you're like, well, what can you do? We can't back out now. We're in it. So I see this shadow.
Right.
And as I come swinging back, as I'm a righty, as I come swinging back, boom, this thing goes off. My arm crumbles. I get, I would always talk about stuff, right? All the macho stuff on Beyond SWAT. I'm like, oh, you don't get blown back. You don't get blown. You get blown back. I realized when you get hit 7.5 feet out from a 30-30 lever action, for those who don't know guns, think of the old Wild West that they shoot buffalo with in the Plains Desert. I got shot with that. He's just, hold on. Hold on 1 second. The power, I gotta switch the cord. Here we go. So then I'm like, whatchamacallit, I get hit by this thing. I get blown back. And I'm just like, hold on, let me just put this there so you don't see my hand. I get blown back. So I'm like, what? And I look at my arm, it's crumbled. And I look, and it's purple blood And being EMTs, I'm like, that's my artery. Blood is pouring out of me so fast. He blew away about 6 inches of my brachial artery and 8 inches of my radial bone. So I have, at first I looked down, my arms crumbled. I can't move it. The blood is purple. And I see this chalk on my green uniform. And there's chalk on my face, white chalk. That's bone that's been pulverized by the bullet, mixed with purple blood that splattered across my chin and stuff. And I went, oh my. Shock is instantaneous. So I let my M4 hang on my neck. I try to go for my Glock and I'm shaking and I can't. And I'm in this hallway and I'm like, I didn't go down, but I got blown into this wall and I can't go anywhere. And I see a bathroom and then a stair, and there's the stairwell. And I'm like, and I yell out, I go, I'm out of the fight. I'm hit real bad. I'm out of the fight. But I'm staying there, right? I'm not back. I can't go back because there's nobody there taking my position. Because if I left, as much as I'd be probably useless because my hand's shaking violently with my Glock in it, I mean, I'm just going to just, spray and pray. If this guy wanted to get up and come out and finish me, we wouldn't be here today.
Right.
So I'm sitting there and, and then like everybody, I'm not a religious, I'm far from that, but let me tell you somebody, if there's ever a avenging angel, it's Joe Schmidt. Comes up, unknown what he knows, because he was on the bottom of the stairwell, comes flying up, grabs me. And now another guy had come and filled somewhat in my area, but he's closer to Brink's side, but he's not where I was. So Joe and I go around to this little love seat that's behind this wall. And my arm's bad and I'm shaking violently. And I have a tourniquet right on my holster where my Glock is. And I couldn't even reach and put it on myself. So if Joe didn't come up through this massive shooting, I would have bled out because my artery's gone. I mean, the blood was so purple. Like you hear about that, but when you see it live on yourself, you're like, this is necessity. So we're sitting there and Joe looks and he goes, I'm like, get the tourniquet, Joe. And I'm sitting there and Joe goes, I got to set your arm first. And I go, I'm looking at myself like, did he just say he's going to set my arm? Joe doesn't realize there's no real arm. The only thing that's holding it together is Under Armour. But for those listeners, let me tell you, this guy is the ultimate SWAT guy. Farm boy strong, can run all day, greatest human being, knows how to cook. Like, this is like, I always say, Joe is the ultimate guy for any woman out there because my thing is sliding. He's the ultimate, he's my hero, right? He's my hero. So he goes, hold on, Rich, I'm good. And he's so calm under fire. He's calm talking to me like we're sitting there at a bar. And he's like, I'm going to set your arm. Joe pulls on my arm. The hole now opens up even more. More blood shoots up, hits Joe, covers me again, covers Joe because my artery's just like flashing around. And I look up and I go, put on the effing tourniquet. So his eyes was like lit up. So now we're just like, wow, I'm bad. I'm in a bad. I'm like, Joe, I look at him, I go, if I don't get out here, I'm dead. I'm dead in like 40 minutes. Even with the tourniquet, it's gushing. So Joe's like, we don't know where he is. Rightfully so. And we really can't give up ground because we don't have enough guys yet. Right. Joe was like, I'm like, we got to go. So Joe, I wrap my arm around Joe. We go back down the same stairs we came up, not those stairs.
So does he put the tourniquet on you now, Rich? Is there a tourniquet on?
Yeah, he gets the tourniquet. He cinches it down, but it's so bad. I mean, it's one thing to have an arterial when it's nicked and bleed. Mine's pulverized. It's gone. It's just like, and it's just shooting out. And so the tourniquet is doing its job, but it's still like pouring out. So,
and where did he put it? Up on your armpit? High?
Like, up high because I'm hit. For people, I'm hit. I'll show you. I'm hit right in the forearm here. And I'll show you, it blew out. I'll show everybody like that. You can see like that big hole there. And I have pictures, and and like I said, if anybody ever wants to.
And Rich has limited movement for people that know his left hand.
Yeah, so I mean, and here's my hand today. So we'll get to the funny story. It's a permanent middle finger. So I have no supination prone. I got scars from my armpit. I got bullet fragments. I got bullet fragments up to my neck, bone fragments up to my neck. But you know what? I'm alive and well, and I owe it. And like I said, I'm alive and well for this individual, for my team, and especially for somebody like Brink and for everybody involved. Doctors and everything. So Joe, we kick out the front door and everybody's out there. there's BCI, there's local guys, and I'll never forget. There's this local guy, like for the small Delaware County Sheriff's Department. He's got a shotgun. Shotgun's going to do nothing against the weaponry this guy has. But he sees that I'm bleeding bad. He comes out from cover just to like offer us. So right now, as I'm like, oh man, I'm fighting for my life, trying to remain calm because I'm going to die. I'm just like overwhelmed by like the heroics, the courageous, and everybody in their whole life is just like, my God, your story, you're the most courageous human being. I'm like, no, I'm not. You want to talk? I will sit here for hours. And I look at people. So I'm looking at everybody. I'm like, get down. He's got a high powered rifle. And now there's people like, holy cow, Rich is tough. That's the mad dog. There's blood everywhere. Rich is on his way. Rich is on his way. And we get to the helicopter. Joe puts me in the helicopter. And this is the amazing human beings that are out there that I had the pleasure of knowing and actually saving my training. Gets me in a helicopter and the doors are wide open and the pilot's like, oh my God, we gotta go. Joe looks at me and goes, hey, you're gonna go see Dr. Summeroff. You got the summer off, you get it? And I went, this is the middle, I'm bleeding to death. And Joe finds the time because he knows I'm a jokester. He goes, but then here's the next thing people don't. Joe puts me in, runs the 50 yards back up through the house, back up because he can't leave the rest of his team.
Right. Unbelievable.
You cannot, and you know this, and forever, like I said, you don't train that. There's nothing you can do. I'm a big proponent. Tough people are only forged through tough times. I'm a tough kid. Oh my God, I'll say, I'm a tough son. But let me tell you, that watching somebody, it's just like, well, Rich is probably not going to make it. I'll be okay if I stay here. No, he's got teammates that need him. He runs back up to get in position.
Yeah.
Amazing. So the pilot starts up. I'm in a helicopter. They want to go to this hospital. I'm in the middle of Margaretville, New York. The hospital is about as big as my kitchen here.
Right. I know.
And the pilot's like, I'm going. They're like, you can't go. You can't land there. There's no landing strip. You'll break the hospital. So I'm in. And so this is where I always joke about the funny part that I talk about. I'm sitting there. Now we all have hooks on our vests. So we jump in and out of helicopters all the time. So I hook in. I'm in decompensated shock. I can't hook in anything. The pilot is dropping swear words on the state police radio because he's like, find me a place to land, right? Because they're very meticulous. They show him where to go. He's probably about 30. We're like your electric wire high. This guy is flying like they're trained amazingly.
Right.
He's barely over the highway. I start sliding on my blood out the open door.
Oh.
The co-pilot reaches back. There's a young trooper that is in the helicopter, just there watching it. And he's strapped in. And when Joe throws me in, I look at him and go, just don't let me pass out. Because if you pass out, you're never going to wake up, right? Because you're going to decompensate. So I start sliding. He starts grabbing me. We're in the middle of I'm like, man, my last thought is I'm going to fall into a trailer park,
right?
And I'm like, what a way to go.
Right.
So this pilot lands it. And then, like I said, this is the heroics of everybody involved. Here's a young trooper, 6-month-old. Here's a guy that I trained in the academy looking at me going, if this guy is bleeding to death, and then the pilot's doing a job, undercover guys, our CNET guys from up there with the beards, the earrings, and they show up in the car. They throw me in the back of the car. I'm bleeding. They rush me up into this small hospital. We come in. I'm being carried in. And now here we go to the great heroics of nurses.
Right.
This is Margaretville, New York. They've seen a car accident. They've maybe seen death, maybe a rollover car accident. They ain't seen gunshots. They ain't seen trooper done. And then about 5 minutes later, you have a GSW to the arm with arterial bleed and a heart rate that's 195, which means I'm pretty much on the way out. And then in 5-6 minutes later, there's another trooper coming in with the GSW to the head. So these nurses are, so my arm, I'm like, whatever you do, don't cut the tourniquet, don't cut the tourniquet, don't cut the tourniquet. And there's a young nurse, second day on the job, they cut the tourniquet. What do you think happens? Purple. that poor girl, she basically almost falls down and passes out.
Oh man.
And then it was just like, you know, and then, like I said, they're grabbing towels, putting it around my arm. 30 seconds later, it's already sopping wet, more towels. They're doing, and you can see they're shaking. They've never seen anything. And they're talking, and they're still taking the time to try to calm me. And I'm trying to sit up because the pain is
So
ungodly. So
what's
this
your
guy,
mindset right now, Rich? Like what's going through? Do
I,
you
I
know
was just
anything else
like,
that's going on? Were you angry? Were you passing out? What were
no,
you?
I was just, the pain, like, the pain was so searing. It was like, it was nothing. You couldn't focus it. It just made your whole body hurt and my arm. And I'm just like, oh, so this nurse physician comes in who just got back from Iraq, and he's this old guy named Chuck, and he's hard as nails. He's a captain in the Marines. And he comes in, he goes, just right off the bat, he goes, Trooper, this is a pretty tough day, huh? Like that. Like, here he is. Like, here's Joe telling me I'm seeing Dr. Somo. Here's this guy going, pretty tough day. And he gives me a wink. And I love, and I'm like, oh, I love your routine. When are you playing out next? Like I'm trying to
Right.
be joking back. He goes, let me see your arm. And he goes, oof. And he goes, okay. He goes, this is high vol. He was like, this is close to an AK-47 because he's seen injuries.
Right. Right.
So he gives me 15 milligrams of morphine. It does nothing. Calls Albany Med. They're like, go to 30. Give me 30. Well, 30 would take down an elephant pretty much, or put a grizzly bear out. I'm sitting there. I go, you using stuff, or is this the placebo? And he
Oh
goes,
my God.
oh, you have an aversion to morphine. So I'm feeling nothing but extreme burning. It's like a hot iron in my arm. And I'm like, great, this is wonderful, which is bad because that raises your heart rate, which puts you in
Right.
decompensated shock and adios, thanks for coming. And so he's like, I need life. I need the helicopters now. And then he's like, I got you, buddy. You're going to get you on the flight. You're out of here. You're going to Albany Med. We can't give you anything else. I'm like, put the tourniquet on. He goes, I can't. I can't put it back on once we take it off. See, everybody knows about ABCs, right? Airway, breathing, circulation, and SWAT. It's reversed. It's circulation, breathing, airway. If you're shot, if you're shot in the leg, I'm going to put a tourniquet on you. And if you're still good and you're still conscious, here's your gun. Anything comes around this corner, you eliminate it.
Right.
You could say, wow, that's tough as nails. But I mean, it's what you do when you're short men. Unfortunately, I knew I was out of a gunfight because I couldn't even use anything because shock was so bad. But they didn't put the tourniquet on. I'm bleeding bad. So they get me all wrapped up. I hear the helicopter land. And then next thing, the worst thing in my life, they're like, oh my goodness, there's another one coming in. So at the time now,
So at this point, you haven't heard anything about
nope, I don't know. So I don't know who's in the other room, but I see the look on the hardcore nurses. They just watched my arm opened up. They came around the corner and they're praying and they're holding themselves. And I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? I'm looking at the CNET guy. He goes, oh, I can't see what's in there. And I'm like, and I had just called my mother, right? I'm just like, call my mother, who was an ICU nurse for 45 years, trauma nurse. And she's like, what's going on? And I go, I'm shot. It's really bad. And I said, you got to go get, my son at the time had just turned 2, 4 days before this incident. I go, you got to get him. Go get him. I can't get in touch with anybody but you. And she goes, are you serious? I go, I am. I go, listen to me. And I didn't say mom. I'm like, Fran. I'm like, listen to me. I'm really bad. Somebody's going to come get my father. They're going to take him up to Albany Med. You go get my kid because that's, you got to get that sorted out. So hang up with her next thing.
where's your wife at the time? Where's Alicia?
She was working at a school.
Okay.
So she's at school. So then, whatchamacallit, so now I know there's somebody in the next room. And then I see the guy who's the physician assistant that's giving me the morphine because all the other doctors are running to this hospital that are from Margaretville because it's early in the morning, right? They're running to get there. He comes around a corner and he comes right up to me and he goes, how you doing? And I'm like, I go, what's going on? He just goes, how you doing? And I'm like, I look at him and he goes, I have to call for a second helicopter for you. He goes, your buddy has to go first. And I go, how bad is it? And he just leans into me and he goes, it's really bad. And I went, and I go, who is it? And he goes, it's the little guy. And I went, oh my goodness. Right. Oh my goodness. So flash forward to craziness of the scene because it's chaotic and they're trying to do their best. Brink's vitals are 10 times better than mine. He's got a terrible head wound, but your vitals slowly dissipate with that. My blood
Which,
pressure is
Rich,
through
I'll
the
be
roof.
honest, not to interrupt you, I didn't even know that. Like, this is, and for those that know my story, this is my best friend now, who ultimately passes. I I thought he was deceased by that point. By the time he got to the hospital, so he still had vitals. This is news to me.
Yeah. So that, I mean, now you're going off of what I'm being told too. So they're like,
Right,
he has
right,
vitals. They're really threaty, but he's
right.
going first, right? So he has to go first. And I get that. So the first helicopter lands right, I think, right on the side of right close to the hospital. So they take him. And so what the problem is, they never changed the names on the flight. They have Rich Mattson in the first helicopter, which is not the case.
Mm,
That's not the case at all. I'm in the second helicopter. So I go back to that same field. They load me up. And the best thing that happened with this incident, there was this amateur photographer who worked for the local paper. And he's snapping all these pictures. I mean, if anybody wants to see, I mean, I have some of the pictures up on my Instagram, and I have stuff on my arm. You can see where it's missing 8 inches of bone. It's like bowed and bleeding, but you can also see the greatness of volunteer firemen, paramedics rushing to get me in this helicopter because they're like, we're going to save somebody. We're saving somebody, and that is. And they probably never had anything like this. They never had
yeah,
such
yeah,
chaos in their small town, and they did it. And like I said, I've always said, like the main thing I said to everybody, I would have to live 6 lifetimes to pay everybody back for what they
right,
did.
yeah,
Those
yeah,
nurses, the PAs, the volunteers. I mean, so meanwhile, in the helicopter, the guy gives me the headset. My flight nurse is working on me. And she's like, I can't give you anything because I have 30 mgs of morphine, but it's doing nothing. And that would just
right,
shut my heart down. So she's trying to, and she can't put a tourniquet on. And I'm talking to the pilot, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm miserable. And now I'm feeling I'm fading, right? I'm feeling the dark windows come in, but I'm sitting up trying to keep myself, but it's really a struggle. So she's doing stuff, and I see like her, she has like a pair of like the shears to cut stuff and everything. So I take her scissors and I sort of poke myself on the side of my leg, not to draw blood, but just to be like, come back because I'm losing it. And that was a dumb idea. And
mm,
like it didn't work. So I'm like, oh my God. But then I'm sitting there and I got the headset on and then I heard it and I was just like, this is life flight one. We are touching down. We have no vitals. We are touching down. Because as you know, we don't transport people who have no vitals by helicopter. So then the procession would pick him up, and all the cops is like people see on the TV, the
right,
stream of cops escorting their fallen comrade to the hospital for, to the morgue. And that's
right.
what they were doing. So they had to stop and do that. And the pilot goes, I'm sorry, Rich. And I was like, and then that was the worst because I was like, wow. I go, man, twice in 10 months, I'm losing great friends, but better freaking human beings. I'm like, why did I do this?
Right.
This is not how it's supposed to go. This is not, you're going to retire, I just want to, and you're just like, what is going on? So, well, now I got to snap back. Now the nurse is like, I'm so sorry. She goes, but you have to hold on. You're really bad. Okay. So she's doing right. Get you back. It's time to focus, get on your mindset. So the pilot, I heard the next thing you know, I hear Albany International Airport, and it's the tower because you can pick up on their headsets and it goes, this is Albany International to all inbound flights, hold at 40,000 feet. They're like Pan Am 106, go to 25,000. United, do not take off. They're yelling out these flights. They're like, we have inbound state troopers critically injured. And I was like, you just shut down an international airport so I can zip
Wow.
across it in 45 seconds.
Right.
What do I hear? Pan Am 101, United this, United that, Godspeed, Godspeed. And I was like, man,
Wow.
there's awesome people in the world. I'm going to make this, right? And so I land on the rooftop and the teams, and the second worst thing can be possible. I'm on the rooftop. They're wheeling me in. They're bringing me down. And there's Barb because she's working that day.
So Barb, for
And
people who know, is Brink's
And
wife.
Barb is doing a training scenario based on a level red situation. And as she's doing that training that day, Albany Med goes, this drill is canceled. We have 2 inbound state troopers. Grave, grave, grave. She's a nurse. So she calls his phone, calls my phone, no one's answering. I could only imagine. So when the information gets to her, they're like, Dave is shot in the face, but his vitals are good. I remember I talked to her briefly, and like when this happened, she was like, and then she found out I was the second one. And they're like, Rich is really bad. His heart rate's 195. Let me get you. Your heart rate shouldn't be 195.
195. Yeah.
You shouldn't have that up there for that long, because that is where decompensated shock and just your heart going, okay, we had enough of this. Hence, physical training from a young age to the day you actually do die is so vital important. So I get in there and I see her, but she was told that I was the first helicopter. So Albany Med hears the first helicopter has touched down because there's no vitals.
So she thought you.
She thinks she's going to the second helicopter, maybe, or that, both of us are going to be okay or in that. She only sees me. I never want to see that look ever again. Sweetheart, she's always been a wonderful woman, and she's strong to this day. But to see that look on somebody's face, knowing that the love, the husband is gone, I just, even to this day, it's just one of those things where, I'm a tough SOB. I don't cry, but there's days I just go, oof. So flash forward, I'm in a hospital. They're rushing me to the emergency room. Once again, just people on point that train to do stuff. They're like, are you righty? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, sign this because we're going to probably have to chop that arm off. It looks really gnarly. And I was like, okay. I'm like, all right, can you give me like a cool knife or a pirate hook? I'm trying to be funny because I'm going in and out. And it's just like, they put me in 19 hours for surgery. And they have to find if they can fix the artery, or they have to chop the arm because of my heart rate's going so high. But I remember just before I went under, I'm in the OR and the doctors are scrubbing. They're like, which I love. I've always grown up being cocky, or I love walking around. I thought I was a cocky. Let me tell you, the doctors are scrubbing, and he looks out and he goes, Trooper. And meanwhile, they're cranking AC/DC. They're cranking and it's the album For Those About to Rock. And I'm like, is this AC/DC? They're like, oh yeah, we're getting our game face on just like you did. And the guys, they're looking out, and the one doctor's already scrubbed, and he goes like this. He goes, don't worry. He goes, I got this. And I went, whoa. I thought I had some balls. This guy had dump truck. He's dump truck material, because I was like, I got this? And he goes, nighty night. Wake up 19 hours later. I'm sitting there. It's 3 a.m. I'm like, okay, my arm's still here. It still hurts. I'm like, okay, maybe something. And then they all come in. And so I don't even know what transpired afterwards. I do know my best friend, and your best friend is dead, but I don't know what transpired. And, everything burnt down and everything. And so I'm in this hospital just like, whoa. And like, what happened? And I remember Barb came in, and that look, man, that's one thing you'll never get out.
Yeah.
That look, that pain. And it's the same pain I've seen on Karen's face, when you see that pain.
Yeah.
Right. Listen, I will tell listeners, no matter what tragedy you see, whether you're a cop, whether you're a civilian, it's in your head. And the way they tell you to deal with post-traumatic stress, trying to find a little folder, put it in a file cabinet, lock it away in your mind. Right? These are from like top psychologists. And that's a great theory. But what they forget to tell you is, you can lock that door, and I can lock it all the time I want. You don't hold the key. That's the thing. You will
Right.
never hold the key to that. So here you are trying to deal with stuff, and you're just like, oh, I don't have the key to help me. I will tell people from day on. Luckily, I was smart enough to reach out from when I was able to get out of hospital, talk to people who've been shot, talk to people who work with the special forces community that have dealt with this, guys that were psychologists who got shot themselves in battle in Afghanistan and became
Right.
prominent psychologists and deal with this. It is simple. Whether you talk about your incident or you talk about, playing poker, which I do, that is where it's at. And that whole, I got your six or I check in. It's wonderful that people say that. And I know there's a lot of phrases you see online. Everybody says these phrases. Everybody on social media wants to say the next best thing, and good for them. And you want to make money off those phrases. I'm all for that. But I always tell people, just make sure you're walking a walk. Call somebody.
Right.
Even send a quick text. Hey, bro, you came across my mind. And I'm lucky that I have people that still do that. But you know what?
Right.
Life goes on. It's 17 years, and you have to adjust. And you have to realize some days it's going to be you against your demons. But I have to say, there's some wonderful people that always look out. And that's, like I said, I moved down to this beautiful place and go shores in Alabama, and a lot of people know my story, and
Yeah.
there's not a day go by. And Southern people are just amazing. They understand. They're just amazing. So I am so grateful to be in an area where people are like, we got you, and they mean it. And that is the key for anybody with tragedy, is getting that, not just once or twice a year. That has to be your new drug, because that's what's going to help you continue on your journey in life. Because
Rich,
then you'll
go
go ahead.
ahead.
No, I'm good.
No, I was
Go
just
ahead.
going to say, I just want to recognize again, like this, it's 17 years. It could be a long time, but for people that lived through it, it could be like yesterday. And just to
Yeah.
recognize the perseverance you had and the emotions and to still feel it. I mean, I get goosebumps hearing it. I get goosebumps when I share the story quite often when I speak. And it's
Yeah.
just, I have to recognize, what you've been through and what you've been pushing through that day to be here. And, we lost Brink, but you're here to share the story and there are a lot of good people in the world. I think right now people often think that, especially today and it's just the division that there is in this country right now, not to get into politics, but it's just so divided. But the majority of people are good people, and they're out there to help somebody, and the nurses and the doctors and the police and the civilians. It's just really powerful. And just to
They,
recognize you for that.
you know what, as much as I joke and I'm a tough individual, I've just learned that there's greatness. There's so many, you know what, there's some great humans, and
Right.
there's more great humans than there are, the people that want to, talk smack or say, oh, you're just trying to make money, you're trying to, you know what, deep down inside, who cares at the end of the day?
Right.
If you can't have humility, you can't admit, hey, some days i'm I'm a wise ass, or I may annoy
Right.
you, or some days I have bad. You have to say, hey man, I have bad days, but I'm good. You have to have that. And I'm grateful that I have a core of people that know and understand that. And and you know what? And they're Billy badasses. And I love that. And they just walk and no one
Right.
knows, and they don't
Right.
care about the recognition, and I'm sort of the same way. I mean, I joke and I like to talk about it. And, people ask me to speak, and once in a while I'll do that. But it's just like, you know, it's good to talk about that, because there's so many vital points. You see the courageous act of so many people, the tragedy of what people, but tragedy is real. That never goes away. And I mean,
Absolutely.
I can sit here and be like, yeah, woe is me. I mean, look at me. I got a bad arm, but I got a permanent middle finger. You
Right.
can't ask. You can't ask. For me,
Right.
coming from New York, you can't
Right.
ask from.
No,
And
no,
my persona, like,
no.
and I was funny as we went on in my surgeries. I spent 21 days on house surgeries. The doctors are like, okay, so the end result is you're going to have this weird claw hand, but you're going to have a permanent middle finger. You should have seen a table of doctors who know me because they were dealing with me for so many years. They all just looked at each other,
Right.
and I go, and they're like, Rich, you're going to be in terrible pain. We have to think about pain management. I'm like, well, I'm not doing pain pills. And I never did. I never took any of
Wow.
them. I was supposed to be on Percocets for the rest of my life. I said, no, I'm not going to be a junkie. But they're like, we have to think about pain management. We have to think about this. You're, the first thing the guy says to me, he goes, I want to break it down to you. He comes in, they're looking at everything after all the surgery. He goes, you will never be a cop again. You're going to never use that arm again. It's going to be this. You're going to be in constant pain. You're going to deal with the fluctuations of this. We may even still have to like go in there and put this rod and fuse stuff. And you have this gigantic scar plastic surgeons can't touch. And he goes, and you're going to have a middle finger. And I just go, I look around and I go, Doc, like permanent middle finger? And then I go, what's the downside? Like that. And the whole room laughs. And I'm like, and he goes, listen, I have $1 million invested in this. And he goes, I don't like permanent middle fingers. I go, it's okay, Doc. You did great. We joked. But here's these guys that actually, they felt for me, that they're like, you're going to be walking around, you're going to have this hand, and I have, me, I'm always talking with my hands down here. And sometimes, I'm like,
right.
When I go out, or if I, go out on dates and stuff, I got to be like, like this. Cause I'm like, talking to, people are like, who's the freak from New York? Right. You don't want that. And it's like, but like I said, every day above ground is the most amazing day of your life. And you're only defined by the sad thing is you're only defined by 2 dates, right? The day you're born, the day you die. So you have to live those days. And in those days, you're going to lose family. You're going to lose friends, and that never goes away. But if you can take the lessons they taught you and just the smile that they brought to your face, it will make it better. It's not going to make it 100%. There's no quick fix for that. Right. I can work out all day and still be miserable. I can play cards all day and be miserable. It's just learning to realize that you were given an opportunity to live again. And you always had that opportunity. Everybody has that opportunity to live the day they're born. So just do it. And I don't care what you're doing. If you got to do 9 to 5, grind out, help your kids get to college, those are the real heroes, right? These are guys that are just like, hey man, I wish I could do this or wish I, and I'm always like, I hope you win the lottery, bro, because you got great heart. And if you show heart and you show humility, life's golden. Life's golden.
That's a great perspective. I don't think we can top this story. And Rich, and it's just really powerful. And guys, just to give a little bit more, Rich moved on. Obviously, he retired because of the disability with the state police, but he moved on and became a judge in the state of New York. And I know everybody's been listening for a while because we've been talking for a while, but just it goes to Rich. I have to acknowledge again, like you didn't give up on life. You made a bigger impact again for the community, the people you serve, to become a judge. I remember watching and seeing you go through it. I'm like, look at this guy. Mattson's going to become a judge. And then you became a judge, sure enough. And it's powerful for what you've overcame in your life and what you've accomplished, and you continue to do it. And now you're enjoying living where you are now in the sun, and you deserve every piece of it. So Rich, I have a couple last questions I'd like to ask everybody. Let me just pull them up. The first is if somebody was to ask you, it's your last day on this earth, and how do you want to be remembered? How would you want people to remember Rich the Mad Dog Mattson, if you were to leave something behind?
You know what I would have to say for that is that just to be wholesome, be true, be unique. I want people to be unique. I was a unique individual growing up. I have all these tattoos, all this. Be that person you want to be, and smile. And if people can say, hey man, that guy always smiled no matter how bad the day was, he died smiling. That's the best part. And I look to smile and laugh every day. So that would be the most important thing, just to go out smiling. Maybe it's a little wise ass smirk, but at least you're going out.
And I could say that is exactly who you are. As long as I've known you, you're always smiling, Rich. You're always full of energy. You've been through a lot. But to say, how do you want to be remembered? Like Rich said earlier, it's not about just talking the talk, it's walking the walk. And Rich is somebody, in everything you've been through, Rich, you keep a smile on. So that's great. That's absolutely powerful. Yeah. So last question is, how can people find you? If people wanted to follow you on social media, your Instagram or your Facebook, can you tell people what your pages are?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. Yeah, Facebook is, my last name. Just it's Richard Mattson. That's simple on Facebook. Just you have to send me a friend request, and then the same on Instagram is the number 1, and then it's one arm Mad Dog, because I have this sick humor. So my email is one arm dog because I have one arm at
Right.
Yahoo,
Right.
but IG is one arm mad dog on Instagram. And if send me a message and say, hey, listen, I heard your podcast, Rich.
Mm,
I'll friend you. I mean, I have pictures. You can see pictures. I know on Facebook I have some pictures of what my arm. I have some gnarly pictures too for like what the people did before and after pictures, and that's just a great testament to the wonderful my team of doctors, from plastic surgeon. I mean, the vascular surgeon was 29 years old. The little guy took
wow.
a vein out of my leg and strung it in my arm. 19 hours. It's a saphenous vein. He took that out and strung it in my arm. And we used to joke with him because he was so young looking. We were calling him Doogie for Doogie Howser, like for the whole 20
Right.
days,
Right.
and just he was. I mean, where do you find these individuals?
Right.
I'm on that store, and he's like, you know what? Let's take a vein here and save this guy.
Right.
And the clock is
Unbelievable.
ticking because the clock was behind me. You have a golden hour. It was so behind me,
Unbelievable.
and I just look and go, I just, like I said, I'm not religious. I don't have that faith, but if there really is a Valhalla, and we can go and laugh and
Hmm.
drink and wonderful warriors hanging out, having fun, and your dogs are there. I want to live long enough to thank all those people, not only in
Mm,
this life but in the afterlife. If we can meet up again, because they risked so much, they took their skills to save me, And I look at them and I said, I look at like people like for Daisy Schmidt, you know, these are the real heroes of my
right.
story. And like the doctors and the nurses from the small hospital, we talk constantly. They finally just retired. These are just
Wow.
wholesome women in this tiny little rural town that still reach out every Christmas. They
Wow.
still do it. And, just for humor, like, for Daisy was like the funniest guy. Like I remember when I started talking at one of the conferences you talked at, the SWAT conference, for Daisy, I come walking off and there's all these people like, oh my God, this great story out of nowhere. For Daisy's just like, he goes, listen, you showed up for one raid and you left early. What's so good about that? And then people like, Pete, he's
Right.
so funny. Like I lose it. People are like, oh my God, this poor guy. And it's that which I love,
Right.
because when you do stuff that to me, you come up and say, hey, how's your finger? And people joke, and it's wonderful because
Yeah.
it makes me feel, and people are like, oh,
Welcome.
it's welcome. And they
Right.
love you and they show it in their way. And that's the greatest thing. And never, you gotta, no matter what you do, if you can't put that smile on your face every day, it's not worth it. It's not worth it.
Absolutely. So
So
amazing. So Rich, thank you. Everybody,
thank you so
please
much.
share. No, thank you. It's been an honor. Please, everybody, share this podcast with your friends and family. It's really impactful to hear Rich's story. Drop comments, reach out to Rich. His contact information will be in the show notes below this episode. But guys, thank you so much for listening. Rich, thank you so much. And everybody, we will talk to you next week. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Personal Perseverance Project. My goal every single day is to help people live up to their fullest potential. So please share this episode, subscribe to my channel, and maybe even leave a review. Be sure to connect and follow me on all my social media channels. And if you would like more information about me potentially being a keynote speaker at your event, or maybe you want to work with me one-on-one as your private coach, be sure to go to my website at davidatkins.com for more information. Thank you.